It's 1940. You're in London. The sirens go off, and you grab your family and run to the shelter. You're going to be down there for 8 hours. In the cold, in the dark, with strangers. This isn't a one-time thing. This is every night, for 57 nights straight. And when you come back up, your neighbor's house is gone. Just rubble. Or you're in Warsaw. There's a wall around your neighborhood now, 10 feet high. The Germans give you 184 calories a day. That's less than a single bread roll. So your 10-year-old son crawls through a sewer to smuggle back potatoes. If he gets caught, they shoot him. For 6 years, this was daily life for hundreds of millions of people. Not soldiers, just people, trying to feed their kids, trying not to freeze, trying to survive until tomorrow. And the thing is, every single one of them had to figure out the same impossible problems. How do you make 4 ounces of butter last a week? Where do you sleep when your house is destroyed? What do you do when the water stops running? We're going to spend the next 3 hours answering those questions. From Nanjing to Normandy, from ration books to firebombings, from the people who slept in subway tunnels to the ones who built bombers in factories, the sailors freezing in the Atlantic, the mothers bartering jewelry for bread, the kids collecting scrap metal, thinking they're helping win the war. This is what life looked like during World War II. December 13th, 1937. The gates of Nanjing stand open, not by choice. The nationalist Chinese forces have withdrawn across the Yangtze River, and the Imperial Japanese Army enters a city of 500,000 civilians with nowhere to go. Within hours, the mechanisms of occupation begin to grind into motion: checkpoints, identification papers, movement restrictions. But this occupation will be different, harsher, a warning of what modern urban warfare would come to mean. The ration cards appear within the first week, issued by Japanese military authorities. These small paper rectangles determine who eats and who does not. The distribution points are controlled entirely by occupation forces. Lines form before dawn. Women carry empty baskets, hoping. The official ration provides barely enough rice to sustain a single person, perhaps 300 grams per day if the supplies arrive. Often, they do not. Water becomes the first critical failure. The city's pumping stations, damaged in the fighting, stop functioning. The Yangtze runs cold and brown with winter silt. Civilians haul buckets from wells that quickly become contaminated. Cholera and dysentery appear within 2 weeks. The International Committee for the Nanking Safety Zone, a group of Western missionaries, doctors, and businessmen, attempts to coordinate relief, but their resources are laughably small against the scale of need. Electricity follows water into collapse. Streetlights go dark. Homes lose power. The nights become impenetrably black. In that darkness, the systematic violence escalates. International observers document what they can. John Rabe, a German businessman and unlikely humanitarian, fills his diary with meticulous records. Minnie Vautrin, an American missionary, transforms Jinling College into a refugee camp for women and children. Her journal entries grow more strained with each passing day. The survivors develop networks. Information travels through whispers, hand signals, and coded visits: which streets to avoid, which Japanese officers accept bribes, where hidden food stores might still exist. Families fragment. Some send children to the safety zone, others scatter to rural areas. Still others remain locked inside homes that offer no real protection. By January 1938, the International Committee estimates that 2 lakh to 3 lakh civilians have been killed. The number is imprecise. Records are incomplete. Bodies lie in streets, rivers, and mass graves. The violence is not incidental to the occupation. It is policy, a demonstration of power intended to terrorize resistance into submission. For those who survive, daily life becomes a calculation. How to obtain food without attracting attention. How to avoid conscription into labor gangs. How to keep children quiet when soldiers pass. The routines of normal urban life markets, schools, work, dissolve into survival patterns governed by fear and scarcity. Western journalists in Shanghai receive smuggled reports. Some publish. Most governments ignore the accounts, unwilling to jeopardize diplomatic relations with Japan. The photographs that do emerge, grainy, horrifying, will not be widely seen until years later, when the world is already fighting a different war. Nanjing becomes the first modern case study in urban occupation and mass atrocity. It establishes precedents that will repeat across Asia and Europe: the breakdown of civil infrastructure, the weaponization of food and water, the transformation of cities into controlled zones where survival depends on occupier tolerance. The lessons are clear, though few are yet paying attention. Elsewhere, the world continues. In Britain, Neville Chamberlain pursues appeasement. In America, neutrality remains policy. In Germany, rearmament accelerates. But in Nanjing, the war has already begun. Not the war of armies and fronts, but the war lived in kitchens, basements, and ration lines. The war that asks not who will win, but who will survive the day. September 3rd, 1939. Britain declares war on Germany at 11 in the morning. By nightfall, London begins testing the system that will govern its nights for the next 6 years. The blackout. No streetlights. No car headlamps except narrow slits covered with cardboard masks. No illuminated shop windows. No glowing cigarettes near windows. No cracks of light escaping from homes. The city, one of the brightest in the world, will learn to live in enforced darkness. The Air Raid Precautions Service, ARP, has been preparing for this moment since 1937. By September 1939, Britain has distributed 1.5 million Anderson shelters, corrugated steel structures designed to be buried in back gardens and covered with earth. Each shelter can hold 6 people, if they do not mind being cramped, cold and damp. The instructions are simple: dig a hole 4 feet deep, bolt the curved steel panels together, pile the excavated soil on top and pray. The first blackout night is chaos. Traffic accidents spike immediately. Pedestrians, unable to see curbs or vehicles, walk into lampposts, stumble into canals, and collide with each other in the dark. Hospitals report a surge in fractures, concussions, and drownings. Drivers, navigating by memory and faith, strike pedestrians they never see. In the first month, road deaths actually increase compared to peacetime. A grim irony that prompts the government to eventually allow dim lighting on vehicle running boards and white paint on curbs. Air raid wardens patrol the streets nightly, enforcing light discipline with a fervor that borders on obsession. A visible crack of light, a curtain poorly drawn, a door opened carelessly, brings an immediate knock and a stern warning. Put that light out, becomes the warden's signature command, repeated thousands of times each night across the city. The penalties for repeated violations escalate: fines, court appearances, public shaming in local newspapers. Families adapt. Blackout curtains become a cottage industry. Heavy fabric, ideally dark wool or thick cotton, must cover every window completely. No gaps at the edges. No light bleeding through thin material. Households test their curtains from outside, adjusting and re-hanging until no glow escapes. The process becomes routine, performed every evening before sunset, reversed every morning after dawn. The psychological effect is profound. London, a city accustomed to gas lamps and electric lights, now feels medieval after dark. Streets empty early. Social life contracts. The darkness imposes isolation, cutting neighbors off from each other, reducing the city to a collection of sealed boxes. Inside those boxes, families sit by candlelight or shaded lamps, speaking quietly, listening for sirens that might never come. Children are the first to be evacuated. Operation Pied Piper begins on September 1st, 2 days before the war declaration. In 3 days, 1.5 million children, pregnant women, and disabled people are moved from cities to countryside reception areas. The children travel in school groups, labeled with tags, carrying gas masks in cardboard boxes and small suitcases. Many have never left London. Some will be gone for years. The separation tears families apart. Parents wave goodbye at railway stations, uncertain when they will see their children again. In rural villages, host families receive evacuees with reactions ranging from genuine warmth to resentful obligation. Some children thrive in the countryside, others endure neglect or worse. The experiment in mass evacuation reveals class divisions. Urban poverty suddenly visible to rural middle-class families unused to lice, malnutrition, and children who have never seen a cow. By year's end, the anticipated bombing has not come. The Connie War allows some evacuees to return home, though many stay away. The blackout continues night after night, a dress rehearsal for horrors that will arrive soon enough. The Anderson shelters wait in gardens, slowly filling with autumn leaves and rainwater. The ARP wardens patrol, and London learns to live in darkness, waiting for the sky to catch fire. January 8, 1940. Britain introduces food rationing. Not because the country is starving, not yet, but because the government has learned from the First World War. Uncontrolled scarcity breeds panic buying, hoarding, inflation, and inequality. This time, scarcity will be managed. Rationing is not an admission of failure, it is, the Ministry of Food declares, a commitment to fairness. Every citizen, rich or poor, will receive the same allotment, in theory. The ration book becomes the most important document in every household. Small bound, printed on cheap paper, it contains pages of stamps and coupons, each corresponding to a specific food item for a specific week. Lose your ration book, and you lose your legal access to food. Damage it, and you face bureaucratic hell trying to get a replacement. The books are serialized, tracked, and audited with precision that rivals military logistics. The initial rations are tight but not catastrophic. Bacon 4 ounces per person per week. Butter 4 ounces, later reduced to 2. Sugar 12 ounces, eventually dropping to 8. Meat is rationed by value, not weight, 1 shilling and twopence worth per week, which translates to roughly 1 pound of cheap cuts or half a pound of better quality. Tea, that essential British ritual, is limited to 2 ounces per week. Milk is rationed for adults, but allocated more generously to children, pregnant women, and nursing mothers. The system operates on a points basis for certain goods. Each person receives 16 points per month, which can be spent on any rationed item within that category: canned goods, dried fruit, rice, breakfast cereals. This allows a small degree of choice within scarcity, housewives, and it is almost exclusively housewives who manage the system, become experts in point arithmetic, calculating and recalculating to maximize variety and nutrition. Shops receive supplies based on the number of registered customers. Families must register with specific grocers and butchers, creating a loyalty enforced by government policy. Shopkeepers track their inventory obsessively. Running out means disappointed customers and accusations of favoritism. Having surplus raises suspicion of black market activity. The balance is delicate, and shopkeepers navigate it daily under scrutiny from both customers and government inspectors. Recipes adapt to scarcity. The Ministry of Food publishes pamphlets with cheerful titles and grim contents. Carrot fudge uses grated carrots, sugar substitute, and cocoa powder to create a dessert that tastes nothing like fudge. Mock banana. Sandwiches involve mashed parsnips with banana flavoring. Woolton pea, named after the Minister of Food, consists of vegetables in pastry. Potatoes, turnips, carrots, whatever is available. The recipe books emphasize nutrition and thrift, with sections on using every scrap. Stale bread becomes breadcrumbs. Vegetable peelings go into soup stock. Bacon fat is saved for cooking. Nutrition, ironically, improves for the poorest families. Rationing guarantees a baseline level of protein, fat, and calories that some had never reliably accessed before the war. Infant mortality declines. Rickets and other deficiency diseases drop. The Ministry of Food subsidizes milk, orange juice, and cod liver oil for children. School meal programs expand. The welfare state begins to take shape, born from wartime necessity rather than peacetime generosity. But fairness is not universal. The black market thrives. Cigarettes, chocolate, nylon stockings, and extra rations can be obtained for cash if you know the right people. Restaurants, technically exempt from rationing, become gathering places for those who can afford to eat out regularly. The wealthy never go truly hungry. Their deprivation is relative and temporary. Prosecutions for ration fraud increase. Forged coupons circulate. Unregistered goods, stolen, diverted, or hoarded, change hands in pubs and back alleys. Enforcement is inconsistent. Some police turn a blind eye, others prosecute aggressively. Public opinion splits. Sympathy for those trying to feed children, contempt for profiteers exploiting shortages. The ration book becomes more than a tool of distribution. It becomes a symbol of collective sacrifice, of shared burden, of the government's reach into every kitchen and every meal. It proves that a modern state can control food with precision, allocating calories as carefully as it allocates ammunition. And when the war ends, years later, rationing will continue. Not because of scarcity, but because the bureaucracy built to manage it has become too valuable to dismantle quickly. September 7, 1940. The daylight raids give way to something worse. At 4:30 in the afternoon, 348 German bombers crossed the English Channel, escorted by 617 fighters. Their target London's docks and East End. The bombers arrive in waves, dropping high explosive bombs and incendiaries in a pattern designed to overwhelm fire services. By nightfall, the East End is burning. The Blitz has begun. The raids continue for 57 consecutive nights. Every evening as dusk approaches, the sirens wail their rising and falling warnings. Families gather essentials, blankets, water, food, identification papers, and head for shelter. Some use Anderson shelters in their gardens. Others descend into public shelters, basements, or the London Underground. The tube stations, initially closed to shelter seekers by government order, are eventually opened after public pressure makes refusal untenable. At peak usage, 177,000 people sleep in the underground each night. Families claim regular spots, marking territory with chalk or simply by habitual occupation. The stations develop social structures. Bunks, wooden frames with chicken wire or canvas, line the platforms. Spaces are allocated by unwritten rules. Families with young children near the exits, couples and singles deeper in. Chemical toilets are installed, though never enough. The smell, bodies, urine, damp concrete, unwashed wool, becomes inescapable. Entertainment emerges from boredom and necessity. Someone brings a harmonica. Children play games between the rails, supervised by exhausted mothers. Volunteers circulate with tea from canteens set up in station alcoves. The London County Council eventually organises the system, assigning bunks, providing basic sanitation, and ensuring some measure of order. But comfort is impossible. The platforms are cold, hard, and noisy. Trains continue running until 10:30 at night, and people sleep fitfully between announcements and the rumble of passing cars. Above ground, the auxiliary fire service fights an impossible battle. London has 2,000 fire pumps, thousands of volunteer firefighters, and an elaborate system of water mains, hydrants, and emergency reservoirs. But the incendiaries fall faster than fires can be extinguished. High explosive bombs rupture water mains, leaving firefighters with no pressure and no supply. Crews watch buildings burn while holding useless hoses. The firestorms become self-sustaining. The heat generates winds that pull in fresh oxygen, intensifying the flames. Entire blocks collapse into infernos. Firefighters retreat, waiting for the fires to exhaust their fuel. The next morning reveals cityscapes transformed. Structures reduced to blackened shells, streets buried under rubble, landmarks erased. The smell of charred wood and brick dust hangs in the air for days. Casualty figures mount steadily. By the end of May 1941, when the Blitz finally tapers off, 43,000 British civilians are dead. Another 139,000 are injured. More than 1 million homes are damaged or destroyed. Families rendered homeless move in with relatives, occupy requisitioned properties, or camp in community centers. The government provides emergency payments and prioritizes repairs to habitable structures, but housing shortages persist for years. Yet routine persists. Shops reopen in damaged buildings, windows boarded over, signs reading, business as usual. Buses navigate streets cleared of rubble by overnight work crews. Commuters step over shattered glass and splintered wood on their way to work. There is defiance in this continuity, or perhaps simply an inability to imagine any alternative. Life does not stop for bombs. Morale becomes a government obsession. Ministry of Information films emphasize resilience, humor, and collective determination. Newsreels show Londoners smiling in shelters, firefighters saving historic buildings, the king and queen touring bombed neighborhoods. The propaganda is not entirely false. Many people do display remarkable composure, but it obscures the exhaustion, fear, and trauma that also define the experience. Children adapt with disturbing ease. They learn to recognize aircraft by engine sound. German bombers have an asynchronous drone distinct from British fighters. They collect shrapnel as trophies, trading pieces like currency. Some develop nervous tics, others become desensitized, treating air raids as routine interruptions rather than mortal threats. Teachers conduct lessons in shelters when schools are too damaged to use. By spring 1941, German attention shifts eastward. Operation Barbarossa requires bombers and fighters to redeploy to the Eastern Front. The raids on London decrease in frequency and intensity. The nightly routine of shelters and sirens eases, though it never fully stops. Families emerge blinking into daylight, surveying damage, counting losses, and preparing for whatever comes next. The Blitz proves that modern cities can endure sustained aerial bombardment. Civilian populations do not collapse. Infrastructure can be repaired. But it also proves the cost, measured in bodies pulled from rubble, in children who flinch at loud noises, in neighborhoods erased from maps. The lesson is clear: total war reaches everyone, and no one is safe because they are not in uniform. June 14, 1940. German troops enter Paris. The government has fled to Bordeaux. The military governor, General Henry Dentz, declares Paris an open city to spare it from bombardment. The designation works. The Wehrmacht marches in without firing a shot. By afternoon, swastika flags hang from the Eiffel Tower, the Arc de Triomphe, and the Senate building. The occupation begins with bureaucratic efficiency, not violence. The curfew arrives on day one. All civilians must be indoors between 9 at night and 5 in the morning. Anyone found on the streets during curfew hours without a special pass is subject to arrest, interrogation, or worse. The German military police, Feldgendarmerie, patrol the empty boulevards in pairs, boots echoing on cobblestones. They carry rifles. They do not hesitate to use them. Clocks are reset to Berlin time, 1 hour ahead of Paris. The change is symbolic as much as practical. Constant reminder that Paris now operates on German schedules, German rules, German authority. Newspapers publish under censorship. Radio broadcasts are controlled. French-language propaganda posters appear on walls, urging cooperation and warning against resistance. Abandoned peoples, one poster reads, "Trust the German soldier." Daily life continues but watched. Parisians need Osweis, identification passes, to move freely. The passes list occupation, address, and reason for travel. Workers commute, shops open, markets operate, but every transaction, every movement is documented and monitored. Checkpoints appear at major intersections and bridges. Papers are inspected constantly. Failure to produce proper documentation means detention, fines, or forced labor assignments. The metro continues running. German soldiers ride the same trains as French civilians, occupying seats with the casual entitlement of conquerors. The protocol is established quickly. Parisians do not make eye contact. They do not speak unless spoken to. They offer seats to German officers without prompting. Resistance at this stage would be suicidal, so it manifests in small refusals, giving incorrect directions when asked, pretending not to understand German, serving officers last in restaurants. Cafes remain open, though their clientele changes. German officers frequent the best establishments, Café de Flore, Les Dex Maguts Maxims. They sit at outdoor tables, drinking wine, speaking loudly in German, creating zones of occupation within the city's social spaces. French patrons avoid these places or endure the presence silently. Waiters serve with mechanical politeness. Faces blank, every gesture a small act of withheld warmth. Food rationing begins within weeks. Bread, meat, butter, coffee, all controlled by German-issued ration cards. The allotments are smaller than in Britain, and enforcement is harsher. The black market emerges immediately. Farmers smuggle produce into the city. Middlemen broker deals in back rooms. Prices soar. Butter costs 10 times the pre-war rate. Coffee becomes a luxury reserved for the wealthy or well-connected. German authorities prosecute black market dealers inconsistently, sometimes turning a blind eye, sometimes making examples through harsh sentences. The German administration requisitions buildings for military offices and officer housing. Hotels become barracks. Theaters host propaganda films and German-language performances. The Palais Bourbon, home of the French National Assembly, becomes a German administrative center. The transformation is methodical, designed to embed the occupation into the city's physical fabric. Jewish Parisians face escalating restrictions. By autumn 1940, a census identifies and registers all Jews. Yellow stars must be worn publicly. Businesses are marked with signs, Jewish enterprise. Property is confiscated. Bank accounts frozen, employment opportunities eliminated. The legal persecution operates openly, processed through paperwork and official decrees. Resistance at this stage is minimal, partly from disbelief, partly from the overwhelming power of the occupying force, partly from the hope that cooperation might ensure safety. French police enforce German orders. This collaboration complicates resistance. German soldiers are foreign occupiers, French police are neighbors, familiar faces now serving new masters. The moral ambiguity paralyzes many Parisians. How do you resist when your own institutions have surrendered? Small acts of defiance begin. Graffiti appears overnight. Gaullist crosses, Vive la France, insults scrawled and quickly painted over. Underground newspapers circulate. Mimeographed pages passed hand to hand. The BBC French service becomes a lifeline, listened to secretly despite German prohibitions. The broadcasts from London offer hope, news, and coded messages that most listeners cannot decipher, but find comforting nonetheless. Winter 1940 arrives cold and bitter. Coal is rationed. Electricity is restricted. Parisians bundle in layers, burning furniture when fuel runs out. The occupation reveals its long-term character, not a brief interlude, but an enduring reality. The initial shock fades into grim routine. People adapt because they have no choice. Yet even in adaptation, the soul of the city resists. Musicians play in subway stations, not for German approval, but for their own dignity. Artists continue creating, even when their work cannot be publicly displayed. Teachers educate children in the formal curriculum mandated by occupiers, while subtly preserving French history and values. These are not dramatic acts of resistance, but they sustain something essential: the idea that Paris remains Paris, even under foreign flags. The occupation will last 4 years. Conditions will worsen. Resistance will organize. Reprisals will be brutal. But in these early months, the pattern is established: Paris under new rules, functioning but not free, enduring but not accepting. A city waiting. October 12, 1940. Construction begins on a wall in Warsaw. Not a defensive fortification, but a barrier to seal 450,000 Jews into 1.3 square miles of the city's center. The wall, when completed in November, measures 11 feet high and 11 miles long, topped with barbed wire and broken glass. It has 22 gates, all guarded by German and Polish police. The Warsaw Ghetto becomes the largest concentration of Jews in occupied Europe, a city within a city, governed by starvation and terror. The ration system is the primary weapon. Official German policy allocates calories based on racial hierarchy. Germans receive 2,310 calories per day, ethnic Poles receive 634, and Jews receive 184. The numbers are not accidental. They are calculated for gradual death. A human being needs roughly 2,000 calories daily to maintain body weight and function. On 184 calories, less than a single bread roll, survival becomes a mathematical impossibility without smuggling. Smuggling operations develop immediately. The wall has gaps, figurative and literal. Children slip through sewers, crawl under wire, navigate passageways in buildings that straddle the wall. They emerge on the Aryan side, buy or steal food, and carry it back. A loaf of bread, a few potatoes, butter wrapped in cloth. The children are chosen because they are small enough to fit through spaces adults cannot navigate, and because their capture results in lighter beatings than would befall adult smugglers. The risks are absolute. German and Polish guards shoot smugglers on sight. Children die on the wall, bodies left hanging as warnings. Yet the smuggling continues because the alternative is watching family members waste slowly from hunger. The ghetto's survival depends on children risking death multiple times per week. Inside the ghetto, the Judenrat, The Jewish council appointed by German authorities to manage internal affairs faces impossible choices. They distribute the inadequate rations. They organize forced labor details. They maintain lists of residents. Cooperation keeps the ghetto functioning. Resistance brings collective punishment. The moral calculus is unbearable. Adam Zerniakow, the Judenrat chairman, fills his diary with anguished entries. He knows he is administering a death machine, but believes mitigation is the only option. In July 1942, faced with orders to facilitate deportations, he will take cyanide rather than comply. Disease follows malnutrition. Typhus spreads through overcrowded apartments where multiple families share single rooms. Sanitation collapses. Water supply is unreliable. Soap is unavailable. The lice that carry typhus thrive in conditions of filth and proximity. By the end of 1941, 43,000 people have died in the ghetto, 10% of the population in 13 months. Most die from starvation, related illnesses, typhus, or tuberculosis. Bodies accumulate faster than burial details can remove them. Corpses lie in streets, covered with newspapers. Children step over them on the way to clandestine schools. Sanitation workers, themselves malnourished, load bodies onto carts for transport to mass graves. The dead are stripped of clothing. Nothing is wasted when fabric means warmth. The psychological impact is corrosive. Dehumanization becomes normalized through daily exposure. Yet cultural life persists in defiance of physical destruction. Underground schools operate in apartments, teaching children Hebrew, Polish, history, and mathematics. Symphony orchestras perform in cellars. Theaters stage plays. The One Egg Shabbat Archive, organized by historian Emanuel Ringelblum, documents ghetto life in meticulous detail. Diaries, photographs, statistics, testimonies, buried in milk cans and metal boxes for future discovery. These acts are resistance, insisting on the value of knowledge and memory even as death looms. Smuggling networks grow sophisticated. Entire buildings along the wall develop secret passages. Basement tunnels connect to Aryan side properties. Bribes corrupt guards at official gates. A functioning economy emerges, trading smuggled food, labor, and forged documents. The black market operates openly in Jasiuke Square, where prices fluctuate based on supply risk and German crackdown intensity. The ghetto population is not homogeneous. Wealthy Jews initially can buy better conditions, larger apartments, black market food, exemptions from labor. But wealth provides only temporary advantage. As deportations begin in 1942, money buys neither safety nor escape. The pretense of normalcy, cafes, theaters, shops, coexists with mass death in surreal juxtaposition. German authorities view the ghetto as a temporary holding area. The long-term plan, not yet fully articulated in late 1940, involves deportation to camps. The ghetto is a stage in a process designed to culminate in extermination. But the inhabitants do not yet know this. They believe survival is possible through endurance. They ration hope as carefully as bread. Photographs from the ghetto show emaciated children with hollow eyes, beggars slumped against walls, smugglers running from guards. But they also show musicians with instruments, teachers with books, families gathered for Shabbat meals scavenged from near nothing. The images document both suffering and the refusal to be reduced to suffering alone. Winter 1940 to 1940. One is the first of 3 winters the ghetto will endure. Fuel is non-existent. Apartments have no heat. Families burn furniture, books, anything combustible. Frostbite and hypothermia join starvation and disease as primary killers. Survival requires daily miracles, a smuggled potato, a bribe that works, a day when the guards turn away. The wall stands as symbol and reality. It is visible evidence of German intent to segregate, to control, to kill through engineered deprivation. The ghetto's existence proves that bureaucracy can be weaponized, that death can be administered through paperwork and ration scales. And when the wall finally falls, it will not be because of liberation, but because there is almost no one left alive inside. March 1941. The Atlantic Ocean is the longest battlefield of the war, 3,000 miles of grey water, where ships carry not only cargo but connection. Letters. Tens of thousands of letters, written by soldiers stationed in Britain, sailors on convoy duty, airmen training in Canada, families separated by oceans and war. The letters travel slowly, sometimes taking 3 months to cross, sometimes never arriving at all. Each envelope represents hope, fear, and the human need to speak across silence. The convoy system governs the rhythm. Merchant ships, cargo freighters, tankers, passenger liners converted for troop transport, sail in groups of 30 to 60 vessels, surrounded by destroyer escorts. The convoys follow zigzag routes designed to confuse U-boats. They maintain radio silence. They travel at the speed of the slowest ship, typically 10 to 12 knots, making the Atlantic crossing a 2-week journey under ideal conditions. But conditions are rarely ideal. U-boats hunt the convoys. German submarines operate in wolf packs, coordinating attacks through radio communication. A single torpedo can sink a merchant ship in minutes. The water temperature is near freezing year-round. Sailors who survive the initial sinking have 15 minutes, maybe 20, before hypothermia kills them. Oil fires from ruptured tankers burn on the surface. Survivors swim through flames. Escorts drop depth charges, hoping to destroy submerged U-boats but often killing men already in the water. Between January and March 1941, U-boats sink 142 merchant ships, totaling over 800,000 tons. The losses are unsustainable. Britain imports 70% of its food and nearly all of its fuel. If the convoys fail, Britain starves and the war ends. Every sunk ship means lost cargo, wheat, steel, ammunition, aircraft parts, and lost mail. Sacks of letters go down with the ships, undelivered messages from men who will die before their families receive final words. The mail that survives is censored. Military censors read every letter sent by servicemen, redacting information that might aid the enemy if intercepted. Ship names, locations, unit designations, casualty reports, all blacked out. Soldiers learn to write in code. "I saw our old friend from school" might mean encountering enemy fire. Families decode what they can and accept that much will remain unknown. V-mail. Victory mail is introduced in 1942 to reduce the physical burden. Letters are written on standardized forms, photographed onto microfilm, and shipped as film reels. At the destination, the letters are reprinted and delivered. This system reduces weight dramatically. 150,000 V-mail letters occupy the space previously needed for 37 mail sacks. The originals are destroyed after filming. What arrives is a thumbnail-sized photocopy, harder to read but better than silence. For families, the letters define time. A mother counts weeks since the last letter from her son in North Africa. A wife measures her husband's survival by the arrival of envelopes postmarked weeks earlier. When letters stop, the silence is interpreted as death, accurate far too often. The official telegram arrives days or weeks later, confirming what the absence already suggested. Children write to fathers they barely remember. Toddlers who were infants at deployment grow into school-aged children whose father is a photograph, and a series of letters read aloud by mothers. The fathers, in turn, receive crayon drawings and block letter notes. "Dear Daddy, I hope you come home soon." The innocence is devastating. Censors intercept letters revealing mental strain. Soldiers write about nightmares, about friends killed, about the impossibility of explaining war to anyone who has not lived it. Some letters are flagged for psychological review. Officers read them, assess stability, and decide whether to allow the writer leave or to suppress the letter entirely. The censorship is paternalistic, protecting morale, both of the soldier and the family, but it also isolates men who desperately need to speak truthfully. Mail call is the most important event in military life. When the bags arrive, mail clerks sort and distribute them to assembled units. Men crowd forward, hoping. Those whose names are called experience visible relief. Those who receive nothing retreat silently, masking disappointment. The letters are read immediately, often multiple times. They are carried in breast pockets, folded and refolded until the paper frays. Some men sleep with letters under pillows, the closest thing to human touch available. In prisoner of war camps, mail is lifeline. The Red Cross facilitates delivery, though it is irregular and heavily censored by captors. Letters from home prove the prisoner still exists in someone's memory. POs craft replies on thin paper with pencils rationed by guards. They describe monotony and hunger in carefully neutral language designed to pass censorship. What they cannot write, abuse, despair, the slow erosion of hope. They try to convey through tone or absence. The letters create parallel narratives. The sender writes one story, sanitized, optimistic, designed to reassure. The reader constructs another, reading between lines, interpreting delays, imagining the truth behind omissions. Both stories are real and both are incomplete. The gulf between them measures the war's capacity to separate people not just by distance, but by unbridgeable experience. When the war ends, the letters will be discovered in attics and drawers, yellowed bundles tied with ribbon. Future generations will read them as historical artifacts, admiring the penmanship and the formality. But in 1941, they are urgent, fragile connections, ink on paper traveling across oceans where death waits in the water. Detroit, Michigan. January 1942. The auto factories that built Fords, Chevrolets, and Chryslers are retooling. Civilian car production stops by presidential order. The assembly lines, already efficient, already fast, are repurposed for tanks, aircraft engines, and military vehicles. The conversion takes 18 months of planning and execution. What emerges is the arsenal of democracy, a manufacturing complex that will outproduce every Axis nation combined. Willow Run, Ford's new bomber plant outside Detroit, is the crown jewel. The building covers 67 acres under one roof, making it the largest factory in the world. Construction begins in April 1941, before Pearl Harbor, and the plant produces its first B-24 Liberator bomber in September 1942. Ford's engineers apply automotive assembly logic to aircraft break production into discrete tasks, optimize workflow, minimize worker movement, maximize speed. The target is one bomber per hour. Initially, it seems impossible. Aircraft are complex. The B-24 contains 1.5 million parts, 30,000 of which are rivets. Early production takes weeks per plane, but Ford refines. Tools are standardized, training improves. Jigs and fixtures speed assembly. By 1944, Willow Run hits the target, one bomber every 63 minutes, rolling off the line and taxiing directly to a runway where test pilots fly them away. The workforce transforms overnight. Before the war, Detroit's auto workers were skilled tradesmen, machinists, welders, tool and die makers. Mostly men, mostly white. The war changes everything. Women enter heavy industry at scale. By 1943, women comprise 25% of the auto industry workforce nationwide, higher in some plants. They operate drill presses, rivet guns, cranes. They wear trousers and headscarves. They earn wages that, while still less than men's, far exceed what domestic or clerical work paid. Training programs run continuously. New hirers, many of whom have never held industrial tools, complete 2 to 6 weeks of instruction before joining the line. The programs teach specific tasks: how to drive rivets, how to read blueprints, how to inspect welds, how to operate overhead cranes. The training emphasizes speed and precision. War production has no margin for error. A faulty rivet in an aircraft wing can kill a crew. Shifts run 24 hours. The factories never stop. Day shift, swing shift, graveyard shift. Workers arrive in darkness and leave in darkness, seeing daylight only on weekends. Fatigue becomes endemic. Accidents spike, fingers crushed in presses, burns from welding torches, falls from scaffolding. Safety regulations exist but are subordinated to production quotas. The official rhetoric frames accidents as acceptable costs of defeating fascism. Dormitories spring up near factories to house workers drawn from across the country. Farmers leave failed harvests in Oklahoma. Families migrate from Appalachia. African Americans flee the Jim Crow South, seeking industrial wages and relative freedom in northern cities. Detroit's population swells from 1.6 million in 1940 to over 2 million by 1943. Housing cannot keep pace. People live in trailers, converted garages, or cramped apartments shared with multiple families. Racial tensions escalate. White workers resist integration. Wildcat strikes erupt when black workers are promoted to skilled positions. The Packard plant strike in June 1943 involves 25,000 white workers walking off the job to protest the hiring of 3 black workers. The strike delays production of Rolls Royce Merlin engines used in P-51 Mustang fighters. Federal troops enforce integration, but resentment festers. Quality control becomes military discipline. Inspectors examine every component, every weld, every rivet. Defects are rejected immediately. Workers whose output fails inspection face reprimands, reassignment, or termination. The pressure is intense. Productivity posters cover factory walls. A slip of the lip will sink a ship. Your work today, victory tomorrow. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. The output is staggering. By war's end, US factories will have produced 86,000 tanks, 297,000 aircraft, 2.4 million trucks, and 17.4 million rifles. Detroit alone builds 500,000 military vehicles. Willow Run produces 8,685 B-24 bombers. The scale defies comprehension. It proves that industrial capacity is a weapon as decisive as any gun or bomb. But there is a cost. Workers endure exhaustion, danger, and displacement. Communities fracture under demographic pressure. The environment suffers. Detroit's air turns gray with factory smoke. Rivers run orange with industrial discharge. The social compact bends citizens accept regimentation, surveillance, and sacrifice because the alternative is unthinkable. When the war ends, the factories will retool again, this time for peace. Workers will be laid off by the thousands, women first. The suburban housing boom and the interstate highway system will be built by the same industrial complex that built bombers and tanks. The war reshapes not just factories but the entire structure of American life. But in 1942, the future is unimaginable. There is only the line, the shift, the quota. 1 bomber per hour, 1 tank per shift, victory measured in tonnage and sweat. December 7, 1941. The attack begins at 7:48 in the morning, Hawaiian time. 2 waves of Japanese aircraft, 183 in the first, 170 in the second, strike Pearl Harbor's naval base and nearby airfields. In 90 minutes, they sink or damage 18 ships, destroy 188 aircraft, and kill 2,403 Americans. Most of the dead are sailors aboard the USS Arizona, which explodes when a bomb penetrates its forward magazine. The ship sinks in 9 minutes, trapping 1,177 men inside. On Oahu, civilians wake to the sound of explosions and machine gun fire. Many assume it is a drill, realistic, perhaps overly so. The illusion shatters when planes bearing red circles strafe neighborhoods near military installations. Bombs intended for airfields miss and detonate in residential streets. Civilians die in their homes. Children are pulled from rubble. The war, abstract until this moment, becomes immediate and personal. By noon, the attack is over. The Japanese carriers withdraw, their mission accomplished. The United States Pacific Fleet is crippled, but crucially, the aircraft carriers, Lexington, Enterprise, and Saratoga, are at sea and escape damage. The repair facilities, fuel storage, and submarine base also survive. The attack is devastating but not fatal. News reaches the mainland in fragments. Radio broadcasts interrupt regular programming. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air, President Roosevelt has just announced. The words repeat, each iteration more real, more impossible. Families gather around radios, listening for details. Lists of casualties will take days to compile and weeks to release. On the West Coast, panic sets in. Blackouts are ordered immediately. San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Seattle go dark. Air raid sirens sound, though no Japanese aircraft are within 2,000 miles. The panic is not irrational. California is within range of Japanese submarines, and the prospect of invasion seems plausible, however unlikely. Coastal residents tape windows, pile sandbags, and scan the sky for enemy planes that never come. Recruitment officers are overwhelmed. On December 8th, lines form at dawn, young men, old men. Men who had resisted the draft now demanding to enlist. The rage is palpable. Remember Pearl Harbor becomes an instant slogan, printed on posters, shouted at rallies, painted on factory walls. The attack unites a nation previously divided over intervention. Isolationism evaporates overnight. Congress declares war on December 8th with near unanimity. Only one representative, Janet Rankin of Montana, votes against. She had also voted against U.S. entry into World War I and will never hold office again. The debate is brief, the outcome foregone. Germany and Italy declare war on the United States on December 11th, and Congress reciprocates the same day. America is now fully engaged in a global conflict. Industrial mobilization accelerates. Factories operating partial shifts move to round-the-clock production. Luxury goods vanish from stores as raw materials are diverted to war production. By New Year's Day 1942, civilian automobiles are no longer manufactured. Typewriters, bicycles, and refrigerators follow. The economy shifts entirely to a war footing, regulated by federal agencies with sweeping powers. Scrap drives intensify. Neighborhoods compete to collect the most metal, rubber, and paper. Children gather tin cans and aluminum foil. Housewives donate pots and pans. The collected material is melted down and repurposed for tanks, ships, and aircraft. The drives serve practical and psychological purposes. They give civilians tangible ways to contribute, fostering unity and purpose. Japanese Americans face immediate suspicion. FBI agents arrest community leaders, Buddhist priests, Japanese language teachers, business owners within hours of the attack. Bank accounts are frozen, travel is restricted. In February 1940, Executive Order 9066 authorizes the forced removal of 120,000 Japanese Americans from the West Coast. They are given weeks to sell property, settle affairs, and report to assembly centers. Most lose everything. The internment camps, officially relocation centers, are built in remote desert and mountain regions. Manzanar in California, Topaz in Utah, Heart Mountain in Wyoming. Families live in tar, paper barracks surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Loyalty oaths are demanded. Young men incarcerated with their families are asked to volunteer for military service. Many do, forming the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, which becomes the most decorated unit in U.S. military history. The irony is bitter. For the families receiving telegrams, the war becomes personal in a different way. The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret. The sentences are formulaic, impersonal. They announce death with bureaucratic efficiency. Families display gold stars in windows, each star representing a son, husband, or father killed in service. The stars multiply throughout the war. Rationing begins. Sugar is first in May 1942, followed by coffee, meat, butter, and canned goods. Ration books are distributed based on family size. Gasoline is rationed to conserve rubber, which is critically scarce after Japan conquers Southeast Asian rubber plantations. Drivers receive stickers for their windshields, A for minimal driving, B for work-related travel, C for essential services. Black market gas coupons circulate, and enforcement is inconsistent. The home front organizes victory gardens are planted. War bond drives raise billions. Women join the workforce. Civil defense volunteers staff observation posts, scanning skies for enemy aircraft. The transformation is total. Every aspect of life, diet, work, leisure, consumption, is subordinated to the war effort. Children collect for scrap drives and practice air raid drills in schools. Teachers lead them to basements or hallways, where they crouch with hands over heads, preparing for bombings that will never reach American soil. The drills normalize war, making it part of childhood routine. By year's end, 1942, the United States has mobilized 3.9 million men into military service. Factories are producing war material at unprecedented rates. The economy, still recovering from the Depression, roars to life. Unemployment vanishes, wages rise, but the prosperity is shadowed by constant awareness of death overseas, of sons and husbands in danger, of a world burning. Pearl Harbor morning becomes civilian evening. The shock fades into determination. The war once distant is now inescapable, and America, reluctant and unprepared, begins to learn what total war demands. 1942, Boeing's Seattle plant. A woman named Rose enters the factory floor for her first day. She is 23, married to a man deployed in the Pacific, and has never operated machinery more complex than a sewing machine. In 6 weeks, she will be riveting aluminum panels onto B-17 Flying Fortress bombers. She is one of 6 million women who will enter the industrial workforce during the war. The training program is intensive. 2 weeks of classroom instruction cover blueprint reading, tool identification, and safety protocols. Rose learns that a rivet gun weighs 8 pounds and vibrates violently when activated. She learns that aluminum dust is toxic if inhaled. She learns that hair must be tied back or covered, Loose strands caught in machinery means scalping. Week 3 moves to the shop floor. Trainees practice on scrap metal under supervision. The rivet gun is pneumatic, powered by compressed air, and requires precise technique. The gun must be held perpendicular to the surface. Pressure must be consistent. Over-riveting weakens the joint, under-riveting leaves gaps. Each bomber requires 400,000 rivets. Every rivet must be perfect. Rose's hands blister during the first week. The gun's vibration numbs her fingers. Her shoulders ache from holding the tool overhead for hours. But she adapts. Muscles strengthen. Technique improves. By week 6, she is keeping pace with experienced workers, driving 40 rivets per hour. The factory runs 3 shifts. Rose works swing shift, 4 in the afternoon to midnight. She arrives home at 1 in the morning, sleeps 5 hours, wakes to manage household chores, and returns to the plant by 3:30. Her mother-in-law watches her 2-year-old daughter. The arrangement is common. Grandmothers and older children care for the young while mothers work. Childcare centers open on factory grounds, an innovation born of necessity. The centers operate 24 hours, staffed by teachers and nurses. Children as young as 6 months are enrolled. Parents drop them off at shift start and collect them afterward. The centers provide meals, often better nutrition than families can manage at home given rationing. The arrangement is efficient but emotionally taxing. Mothers see children briefly in the morning and before bed, missing entire days of development. The pay is better than anything Rose earned before. She makes $40 per week, 80% of what male riveters earn for identical work. The disparity is accepted as normal. Management justifies it by claiming men are primary breadwinners. Union contracts, negotiated before women's mass entry into industry, codify the gap. Women protest, but priority is maintaining production, not equality. Accidents are frequent. Rose witnesses a woman's hair caught in a drill press. The machine scalps her before anyone can shut it down. Another woman loses 3 fingers to a hydraulic press. Safety guards exist but slow production, so foremen pressure workers to remove them. Management tracks injuries, but does little to prevent them beyond posting cautionary signs. Propaganda frames the work as patriotic duty. Posters depict Rosie the riveter, strong, confident, sleeves rolled up, riveting with determination. The real Roses are exhausted, underpaid, and overworked. But they persist because husbands, brothers, and sons need planes, tanks, and ships. The abstract goal, victory, justifies immediate suffering. Social dynamics on the floor are complex. Male workers resent women's presence, viewing them as temporary interlopers who depress wages and threaten post-war job security. Some men sabotage women's work, loosening rivets, hiding tools, providing incorrect instructions. Others are supportive, recognizing that women's labor is indispensable. The tension never fully resolves. Racial integration follows gender integration. African American women enter factories, though they are segregated into the hardest, dirtiest jobs. Janitorial work, foundry labor, heavy lifting, white women rivet, black women haul metal. The hierarchy is explicit and enforced. Quality control inspectors are almost exclusively male. They scrutinize women's work more harshly than men's, rejecting rivets for minor imperfections and requiring rework without pay. The double standard demoralizes but also motivates. Women strive for flawlessness to avoid criticism. By 1943, women comprise 65% of the aircraft industry workforce. Without them, production would collapse. The B-17, B-24, P-51, and other aircraft rolling off lines are built primarily by women's hands. This fact is acknowledged in wartime, but conveniently forgotten afterward. When the war ends, Rose and millions like her will be laid off. Rosie the riveter. Posters will be replaced with images of women in kitchens. The skills they acquired will be dismissed as temporary wartime measures. But in 1943, Rose is essential. She drives rivets, one after another, building bombers that will carry war to the enemy. Her work is monotonous, exhausting, and historically transformative. Spring 1942. In backyards, vacant lots, and public parks across America, citizens dig. They plant carrots, beans, tomatoes, and lettuce. The government calls them victory gardens, and they become the most visible symbol of civilian contribution to the war effort. By 1943, 20 million gardens produce 40% of the nation's vegetables. The program reduces pressure on commercial agriculture, freeing farm output for military use. The Department of Agriculture distributes instruction manuals. Titles like Victory Garden Manual and Grow Your Own. Can Your Own provide planting schedules, pest control tips, and preservation techniques? The manuals are distributed free through schools, libraries, and community centers. Seed companies report unprecedented demand. Hardware stores sell out of shovels, hose, and watering cans. Urban gardening faces challenges. Soil in industrial cities is often contaminated or compacted. Residents haul in topsoil by wheelbarrow, build raised beds, and compost kitchen scraps. Children join community gardening clubs, learning to plant seeds and pull weeds. Schools dedicate portions of playgrounds to student gardens, integrating agriculture into curriculum. Canning becomes essential. Fresh vegetables harvested in summer must last through winter. Families acquire mason jars, pressure cookers, and canning supplies. Women gather in community centers for canning demonstrations, learning to process tomatoes, pickle cucumbers, and preserve beans. The labor is intensive: washing, chopping, boiling, sealing, but necessary. A successful garden yields hundreds of jars, stored in basements and cellars. Salvage drives complement gardening. The government launches campaigns to collect scrap metal, rubber, paper, and cooking fat. Every material is needed. Scrap metal is melted and reformed into tanks, ships, and artillery shells. Rubber, critically scarce after Japan occupies Southeast Asian plantations, is reclaimed from old tires, boots, and hoses. Paper is recycled into packaging for ammunition and rations. Cooking fat, chemically processed, becomes glycerin for explosives. The drives are competitive. Neighborhoods challenge each other to collect the most tonnage. Schools organize collection teams, with prizes for top contributors. Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts go door to door, hauling wagons filled with donations. The collections are public events. Trucks arrive, materials are weighed and recorded, and totals are announced with fanfare. In August 1942, President Roosevelt calls for a national rubber drive. The response is overwhelming. In 1 month, Americans donate 400 million pounds of scrap rubber. Gas stations serve as collection points. Citizens contribute worn tires, rubber boots, garden hoses, bathing caps, and rubber toys. The pile grows until it covers entire city blocks in some areas. The government provides incentives. Rubber donors receive 1 penny per pound, a token payment that acknowledges contribution without creating profit motive. Metal donors receive similar compensation. The payments are symbolic, reinforcing that salvage is duty, not commerce. Propaganda saturates public space. Posters declare, "Get in the scrap. Salvage will win the war." Your old rubber boots may save a soldier's life. Radio jingles promote collection dates. Newsreels show mountains of donated material being processed into war goods. The messaging is relentless and effective. Children are mobilized. They collect tin cans, flattening them for transport. They gather newspapers, bundling them with twine. They save aluminum foil from chewing gum wrappers, rolling it into balls the size of baseballs. The activities teach resourcefulness and reinforce that waste is unpatriotic. Cooking fat collection is particularly unglamorous but critical. Housewives save bacon grease, meat drippings, and frying oil in tin cans. When a can is full, it is taken to a butcher's shop, which pays 4 cents per pound and forwards the fat to rendering plants. The glycerin extracted from fat is essential for manufacturing nitroglycerin, used in explosives. A single pound of fat contains enough glycerin for several bullets. The emotional impact is significant. Salvage drives create tangible connection between home front and battle front. Donating a tire or a tin can feel like directly arming a soldier. The act is small, but the symbolism is powerful. It transforms passive civilians into active participants. Not everyone contributes equally. Wealthy neighborhoods donate more because they have more to give. Poor families, already making do with less, have little surplus to spare. The disparity is rarely acknowledged in official rhetoric, which frames salvage as universal sacrifice. Black markets undermine official collection. Some individuals hoard scrap to sell at inflated prices to industrial buyers. Others steal from collection points, reselling material for profit. Law enforcement cracks down sporadically, but enforcement is inconsistent. By 1944, salvage fatigue sets in. The initial enthusiasm wanes. Collection totals decline. The government intensifies propaganda, but returns diminish. Citizens have donated what they can spare and are unwilling to part with functional items. Victory gardens persist longer. The gardens provide not just food but also psychological benefit, control in an uncontrollable time, productivity in the face of helplessness. Gardeners take pride in self-sufficiency. A family that grows its own vegetables reduces dependence on ration supplies and contributes to national resilience. When the war ends, many victory gardens are abandoned. Families return to purchasing produce from markets, but some persist, especially among those who discovered genuine satisfaction in cultivation. The gardens leave a legacy, a generation that understands food production and the value of self-reliance. In 1943, however, the gardens and salvage drives are immediate necessities. They turn civilian life into logistics. Every backyard becomes a supply line. Every kitchen becomes a factory. The message is clear: total war requires total participation. Paris, 1943. In an alley behind a butcher shop, a transaction unfolds. A woman in a worn coat produces a gold bracelet. The butcher examines it briefly, nods, and disappears into the back room. He returns with a package wrapped in newspaper. 2 kilograms of pork, illegal and expensive. No money changes hands, jewelry for meat. The exchange is illegal, dangerous, and ubiquitous. The black market is an inevitable consequence of rationing. Legal supplies are insufficient. Prices are controlled. Scarcity is severe. Demand remains constant. The gap between need and availability creates opportunity for those willing to risk prosecution. Cigarettes become universal currency. In occupied Europe, a single American cigarette trades for bread, soap, or coal. A full pack can buy a chicken. Cartons are wealth. Soldiers who receive cigarettes in rations become instant traders. A GI can exchange smokes for wine, sex, or safe passage through dangerous territory. Bread prices on the black market rise to 300% above official rates in cities like Warsaw, Athens, and Amsterdam. Families spend entire weekly wages on a single loaf. Bakers operate dual systems, selling rationed bread at controlled prices during the day, selling unrationed loaves through back doors at night. Butter, eggs, and milk are luxury goods. Farmers who produce these items bypass official distribution channels. They sell directly to urban middlemen who transport goods in hidden compartments of trucks, bicycles, or even baby carriages. The risk of confiscation is high, but profits justify it. Women dominate the black market as both buyers and sellers. They carry goods in handbags, beneath coats, or strapped to their bodies. They negotiate prices in whispers. They develop networks based on trust, neighbors, friends, family members vouching for new participants. The networks are fragile. One informant can collapse an entire chain. Moral economies emerge. Stealing from hoarders is tolerated, even celebrated. Stealing from the desperate is condemned. A shopkeeper who inflates prices excessively faces social ostracism or worse, vandalism, threats, violence. The community enforces its own standards, separate from official law. Police and occupation authorities respond inconsistently. Some officers enforce anti-black market laws zealously, arresting traders and confiscating goods. Others participate, demanding bribes in exchange for ignoring violations. Corruption permeates enforcement. The line between law enforcer and criminal blurs. German authorities in occupied territories use the black market strategically. They tolerate certain trade because it pacifies populations and enriches collaborators who maintain order. But they also crack down periodically, making examples of high-profile traders to reassert control. In concentration and prisoner of war camps, the black market operates openly. Cigarettes, chocolate, and soap from Red Cross parcels are traded for bread, clothing, or labor. Guard corruption enables smuggling. A guard paid in cigarettes might look away when prisoners steal tools, organize escapes, or barter with civilian workers. Counterfeit ration coupons circulate widely. Forgers produce convincing replicas using stolen paper and printing presses. The coupons are sold to black market vendors who redeem them for goods, which are then resold at inflated prices. The cycle drains official supplies and enriches criminals. Some black market activity is survival, not profit. A mother trading her wedding ring for milk is different from a wholesaler hoarding grain, to manipulate prices. The distinction matters to participants but not to law. Both are illegal. Ethical debates rage. Is it theft to steal from occupiers? Is it immoral to pay black market prices when others cannot afford them? Is trading jewelry for food a betrayal of absent husbands or a necessary act to feed children? There are no clear answers, only choices made in desperation. Children participate. They carry messages, move small packages, and act as lookouts. Their youth provides cover. Adults assume children are playing, not working. But children caught face punishment. German authorities in Poland shoot child smugglers. In France, they are imprisoned. The stakes are adult, even if the participants are not. The black market sustains resistance movements. Forged documents, weapons, and explosives are purchased with black market funds. Resistance fighters live underground, dependent on illegal food and shelter. Without the black market, organized resistance would collapse. After liberation, black markets persist. Legal supplies remain scarce. Rationing continues. Veterans return home to find empty stores and long lines. They turn to black markets out of frustration and need. In some cities, black market trade does not end until the early 1950s, nearly a decade after the war. The legacy is complex. The black market reveals both resilience and inequality. Those with resources, jewelry, connections, currency, survive more comfortably. The poor lacking tradable wealth endure greater suffering. The market is democratic in operation. Anyone can participate, but outcomes are stratified by pre-existing wealth. In 1943, however, these reflections are distant. The woman leaves the alley with pork hidden beneath her coat. She avoids eye contact with pedestrians. She walks quickly but not suspiciously. At home, her children will eat meat for the first time in weeks. She does not consider whether her actions are moral. She considers only that her children are hungry, and she has fed them. That is enough. October 23, 1942, El Alamein, Egypt. The sun sets over the desert, and 195,000 men prepare for battle. The terrain is featureless sand, rock, and heat. No rivers, no forests, no cities. Just flatness stretching to the horizon. In this environment, logistics is survival. Fuel, water, and ammunition are not support elements, they are the battle itself. British General Bernard Montgomery commands the 8th Army. 195,000 troops, 1,029 tanks, 2,311 artillery pieces, and 750 aircraft. Axis forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel are smaller, 116,000 men, 547 tanks and 675 aircraft. But numbers alone do not tell the story. The Desert War is won by supply lines, and Rommels are failing. Water is the first problem. Each soldier requires 5 gallons per day for drinking, cooking, washing, and cooling engines. A division of 10,000 men needs 50,000 gallons daily. The British establish water points along the coast, using desalination units and trucking water from the Nile, 1,400 miles away. German water supplies are dependent on coastal wells and shipments across the Mediterranean, which are increasingly intercepted by Allied aircraft and submarines. Fuel is even more critical. Tanks consume fuel at staggering rates. A British Crusader tank burns 200 gallons to travel 100 miles. A German Panzer IV consumes similarly. Rommel's supply route runs across the Mediterranean from Italy to Libya, then overland to the front. Allied air and naval forces sink supply ships faster than they can be replaced. By October, Rommel's fuel reserves are nearly exhausted. He has enough for a defensive battle. Maybe, but not a sustained offensive. Montgomery stockpiles obsessively. For 3 months before the battle, British supply convoys deliver fuel, ammunition, food, and replacement parts. Montgomery refuses to attack until he has 300 tanks in reserve, replacements for losses he anticipates. This caution frustrates Churchill, who demands immediate action, but Montgomery understands that desert warfare punishes improvisation. The jerrycan illustrates the logistical war. The German-designed container holds 20 liters, features 3 handles for easy carrying, and seals tightly to prevent spillage. British fuel cans, by contrast, leak, corrode, and break easily. In 1940, British forces capture German jerrycans and immediately recognize their superiority. By 1942, Britain is manufacturing copies, and the jerrycan becomes standard issue. A fuel container, humble and overlooked, shifts the war's momentum. Maintenance consumes enormous time. Sand infiltrates engines, transmissions, and gun mechanisms. Tanks require daily servicing, cleaning air filters, tightening track tension, checking oil levels. Mechanical failures often exceed combat losses. A broken tank is as lost as a destroyed one if it cannot be repaired. British mobile repair units follow advancing forces, salvaging damaged vehicles and returning them to service. German repair capacity is limited by parts shortages and fuel scarcity. The battle begins with an artillery barrage, 880, 2 guns firing simultaneously. The noise is apocalyptic. Shells rain on German positions for hours. Then the infantry advance through minefields, clearing paths for tanks. The fighting is brutal and methodical. Progress is measured in yards. Casualties mount on both sides. Rommel, ill with desert sickness, is in Germany on medical leave when the battle starts. He flies back immediately but arrives too late to change the outcome. His forces, weakened by fuel shortages and outnumbered, cannot hold. On November 2nd, Rommel orders a retreat. Hitler countermands the order, demanding a fight to the last man. Rommel ignores Hitler, knowing that staying means annihilation. The British pursue but cannot catch Rommel's retreating forces. British tanks run out of fuel. German rearguards fight delaying actions, sacrificing themselves to allow the main force to escape. The pursuit falters, and Rommel withdraws 1,000 miles west to Tunisia. El Alamein is celebrated as a British victory, the first major defeat of German forces. Churchill famously remarks, "Before Alamein we never had a victory. After Alamein we never had a defeat." The statement is rhetorical exaggeration, but captures the psychological shift. The battle demonstrates that modern war is logistical war. Rommel is a skilled tactician, but tactics cannot overcome supply failure. His tanks low on fuel sit immobile. His men short of water weaken in the heat. His artillery, lacking shells, fires sporadically. Montgomery, less charismatic but more methodical, wins by ensuring his forces have what Rommel's lack: fuel, water, ammunition, and reserves. The desert offers no shelter, no concealment, no natural resources. Every liter of fuel, every gallon of water, every round of ammunition must be transported hundreds of miles. Armies that master logistics survive. Those that fail, regardless of courage or skill, are defeated by distance and scarcity. Survivors remember the heat, the thirst, the sand in their food and clothes. They remember engines overheating, weapons jamming, and the endless expanse of nothing. They remember comrades who died not from bullets, but from dehydration, heat stroke, and infections festering in unwashed wounds. The desert is indifferent, and it kills without malice. By late November 1942, the Axis retreat continues. Rommel's Afrika Korps will never regain the initiative. The Mediterranean supply lines remain contested, but Allied control tightens. The lesson is clear in the desert: water is ammunition, fuel is life, and logistics determines victory. March 1943. The North Atlantic is the most dangerous body of water on Earth. German U-boats patrol in wolf packs, coordinating attacks through radio communication. Allied convoys, merchant ships carrying food, fuel, and weapons, sail in formations of 30 to 60 vessels, escorted by destroyers and corvettes. The mathematics are brutal. If U-boats sink ships faster than they can be replaced, Britain starves and the war ends. March is the worst month. U-boats sink 108 ships, totaling 620, 7,000 tons. Convoy AX-229 loses 13 ships in 3 days. Convoy SC-122 loses 9. The combined convoys represent over 140,000 tons of cargo lost to the sea: wheat, steel, aircraft, tanks, and men. The Atlantic is a graveyard. Life aboard a U-boat is claustrophobic hell. The Type 7 U-boat, Germany's standard submarine, measures 220 feet long and 20 feet wide. 4 men live inside this steel tube for patrols lasting 8 to 12 weeks. There is no privacy, no fresh air, no escape from the smell of diesel fuel, unwashed bodies, and mold. Bunks are shared, hot bunking, they call it. One man sleeps while another works. Food spoils quickly. Fresh bread lasts 1 week, vegetables a few days longer. After that, the crew subsists on canned goods and dried rations. Drinking water is rationed to 1 liter per man per day. Bathing is impossible. Beards grow thick. Skin breaks out in rashes. Illness spreads through the confined space, flu, dysentery, infections. The toilet, one for 44 men, is a complex machine requiring pressurization to flush into the sea. Misuse can flood the submarine with sewage, a humiliating and dangerous malfunction. New crew members receive explicit training on toilet operation, and mistakes are mocked mercilessly. U-boats hunt at night, surfacing to recharge batteries and ventilate the hull. The diesel engines roar, exhausting carbon monoxide that lingers in the confined space. Men gulp fresh air greedily, knowing it may be hours before they surface again. Lookouts scan the horizon for convoy smoke or escort masts. When a target is spotted, the submarine dives, approaching submerged to torpedo range. Torpedoes are finite and precious. Each U-boat carries 12 to 14 torpedoes. A single torpedo costs 24,000 Reichsmarks, equivalent to years of a worker's salary. Misses are catastrophic. Commanders agonize over firing solutions, balancing aggression against the risk of wasting ordnance. A successful hit, a merchant ship sinking, oil spreading, men screaming in the water, brings grim satisfaction. One less ship delivering supplies to the enemy. But the hunters are also hunted. Allied escort vessels carry sonar, ASDC in British terminology, capable of detecting submerged submarines. Once detected, the escort drops depth charges, barrels filled with 300 pounds of explosives, set to detonate at specific depths. The charges explode in patterns around the submarine, creating shock waves that rupture hulls, crack welds, and shatter instruments. Inside the U-boat, a depth charge attack is terror. The crew hears the splashes as charges hit the water, then silence, then explosions, deafening concussions that shake the boat violently. Lights shatter. Men are thrown against bulkheads. Hull plates groan under pressure. Leaks spray seawater into compartments. The crew works frantically to shore up damage, pump water, and maintain depth control. If the boat loses buoyancy, it sinks. If it surfaces, escorts machine gun survivors. The survival rate for U-boat crews is appalling. Of 39,000 men who serve in U-boats during the war, 28,000 die, a 72% casualty rate, the highest of any military service in the war. The men know the odds. They volunteer anyway, driven by patriotism, propaganda, or the submarine service's elite reputation. Allied losses are also severe. Merchant sailors have no combat training, no weapons, no armor. When a torpedo strikes, they have minutes to abandon ship. The water temperature in the North Atlantic hovers near freezing year-round. A man in the water has 15 minutes, maybe 20, before hypothermia kills him. Lifeboats and rafts offer some protection, but storms, exposure, and dehydration kill survivors over days. Oil tankers are the worst. A torpedo puncturing a tanker's hull ignites the fuel, creating fires that spread across the water's surface. Men jump into burning seas. Some drown, others burn. Survivors describe swimming through flames, skin blistering, lungs seared by superheated air. Escorts rescue who they can, but priority is defending the convoy, not saving the sinking. Convoy doctrine evolves. Escort groups increase in size and coordination. Aircraft carriers accompany convoys, providing air cover that forces U-boats to submerge, reducing their effectiveness. Long-range patrol aircraft, Liberators and Sunderlands, cover the mid-Atlantic gap, previously beyond air reach, where U-boats operated freely. Radar and sonar improve. By 1943, Allied escorts detect U-boats at greater ranges and with higher accuracy. High-frequency direction finding, HFDF, or HUF-DUF, allows escorts to triangulate U-boat radio transmissions, locating submarines even when submerged. The technology shifts the balance. Enigma decryption gives Allies critical advantages. British codebreakers at Bletchley Park read encrypted German naval communications, revealing U-boat locations, patrol routes, and attack plans. Convoys are rerouted to avoid wolf packs. Escorts are positioned to ambush submarines. The intelligence, code-named Ultra, is so valuable that its existence is concealed even from most Allied commanders. By May 1943, the tide turns. U-boat losses spike. 41 submarines sunk in 1 month. Admiral Dönitz, commanding the U-boat fleet, withdraws submarines from the North Atlantic, conceding defeat. The Allies have won the Battle of the Atlantic, ensuring that supplies will continue flowing to Britain and, eventually, to the invasion forces preparing for D-Day, the cold math shifts decisively. In 1943, Allied shipyards produce vessels faster than U-boats can sink them. Liberty ships mass-produced cargo freighters roll off American assembly lines at a rate of 3 per day. Each ship takes 70 days to build. U-boats cannot match that pace of replacement. For the men on both sides, the statistics are abstractions. They know only cold fear and the infinite indifference of the ocean. Survivors remember the sound: torpedoes exploding, depth charges detonating, hulls cracking, water rushing in. They remember the silence afterward, floating in darkness, waiting for rescue that might never come. The Atlantic claims over 30,000 Allied merchant sailors and 28,000 German submariners. The ocean keeps their bodies and the war moves on. But without victory in this invisible battle, fought in freezing darkness beneath the waves, all other victories would have been impossible. Eastern Front, Soviet Union, summer 1943. Inside a T-34 medium tank, 5 men live, fight, and die together. The tank is their home, their weapon, and their tomb. Understanding the tank requires understanding the crew, their routines, their roles, their intimacy with a machine that is both shield and trap. The commander sits in the turret, head and shoulders protruding through the open hatch during transit, ducking inside when combat begins. His job is situational awareness, scanning terrain, identifying targets, coordinating with other tanks via radio. He wears a leather helmet with built-in headphones, though radio communication is often garbled by static and engine noise. His commands are simple: direction, range, target type. Panzer 11 o'clock, 800 meters. The gunner sits below the commander, eye pressed to the optical sight, hands on the traversing and elevation controls. Aiming is mechanical, not electronic. He rotates a hand crank to swivel the turret, another to raise or lower the gun barrel. The process is slow. A full turret rotation takes over 1 minute. He must lead moving targets, compensating for his tank's motion and the enemy's speed. Firing is a balance of precision and instinct. The loader stands behind the gunner, responsible for handling ammunition. Each 76mm shell weighs 25 pounds. He lifts it from the ready rack, slides it into the breech, and slams the breech closed. The gun recoils violently when fired, and the loader must avoid being struck. A well-trained loader can fire 8 rounds per minute. Under stress, the rate drops. Exhaustion, fear, and cramped space slow everything. The driver sits in the front hull, controls identical to a truck, steering levers, throttle, brake pedals. His view is through a narrow slit, vision limited to what's directly ahead. Peripheral awareness is impossible. He navigates by the commander's instructions, relayed through intercom: forward, slow, left 10 degrees, stop. The radio operator and hull machine gunner occupies the front hull beside the driver. He monitors radio traffic, relays orders, and operates the hull-mounted machine gun. In practice, his role is the least critical. Radio discipline is poor. Most communication happens through flags or direct shouting between tank commanders. The hull gun is inaccurate and rarely used. He is, effectively, a 5th crew member with diminishing utility. Daily maintenance is mandatory. Every morning before first light, the crew inspects the tank. Track tension is checked. Loose tracks derail too, tight tracks stress the drive wheels. Oil levels are monitored. The V12 diesel engine consumes oil rapidly, and running dry seizes the engine. Air filters are cleaned. Dust and dirt clog them within hours, starving the engine of air. Fuel is topped off. The tank carries 120 gallons, enough for 120 miles on roads, less cross-country. The interior is brutal. Summer temperatures inside reach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The crew wears minimal clothing, thin cotton shirts, trousers, boots. Sweat soaks them within minutes. Dehydration is constant. Water is rationed to 1 canteen per man per day, insufficient for the heat. Winter is worse. Temperatures drop to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Diesel fuel gels, unless mixed with gasoline to lower the freezing point. Engines must be warmed by external fires before starting, pouring fuel into trays beneath the tank, igniting it, and waiting for the block to heat. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, noses. The T-34 is, statistically, the most produced tank of the war, over 84,000 built. Each represents 5 men whose names are mostly forgotten, whose lives were brief and violent. The tank remains in museums, restored and painted. The crews are dust, scattered across battlefields from Stalingrad to Berlin. July 24, 1943, Hamburg, Germany. The city sleeps under blackout regulations, curtains drawn, streetlights dark. At 12:57 in the morning, air raid sirens wail. Residents accustomed to false alarms and minor raids descend into shelters without panic. Tonight will be different. Tonight, the RAF Bomber Command will demonstrate what concentrated incendiary bombing can achieve. Operation Gomorrah begins. 791 aircraft, Lancasters, Halifaxes, Stirlings and Wellingtons, approach Hamburg in a stream 40 miles long. They carry 2,300 tons of bombs, 2/3 of which are incendiaries. The plan is methodical: high explosive bombs to shatter buildings and rupture water mains, followed by incendiaries to ignite the wreckage. The first wave drops target indicators, flares that burn brightly, marking aim points for following bombers. Pathfinder aircraft, flown by elite crews, ensure accuracy. The markers fall across Barmbek, Hammerbrook, and other densely populated working-class districts. The main force follows, releasing bombs in patterns designed to maximize coverage and overwhelm fire services. Within 30 minutes, hundreds of fires ignite. Hamburg's firefighters respond, but water mains damaged by high explosive bombs provide no pressure. Hoses run dry. Fire engines stand useless as flames spread building to building. The fires merge, feeding on wooden structures, furniture, and stored coal. The blaze grows exponentially. By 2 o'clock in the morning, a firestorm develops, a meteorological phenomenon where intense heat creates powerful updrafts, pulling fresh oxygen into the fire and generating hurricane-force winds. The winds reach 150 miles per hour, tearing roofs from buildings and hurling debris through the air. The temperature at the fire's core exceeds 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt glass and asphalt. Civilians in shelters face impossible choices: stay inside and suffocate as fires consume oxygen, or flee and face the inferno outside. Those who stay die from carbon monoxide poisoning, asphyxiation, or heat. Their bodies, found days later, are unmarked. They simply stop breathing when the air turned toxic. Those who flee encounter hell. Streets are rivers of flame. Asphalt melts into tar, trapping feet. Wooden beams fall from collapsing buildings. The wind is so strong that people are blown off their feet and into fires. Survivors describe running through walls of flame, clothing igniting, skin blistering. They run toward water, canals, rivers, parks, hoping to escape the heat. The canals become death traps. Thousands plunge into the water to escape flames, but the heat follows. The water boils, steam scalds exposed skin. Bodies float in masses, cooked. Others drown in the crush of panicked humanity. The canals, meant as refuges, become mass graves. Children are separated from parents in the chaos. Families, holding hands, are torn apart by the wind. Mothers scream for children lost in smoke. The sound is drowned by the roar of flames, a continuous, deafening thunder that obliterates all other noise. The raid ends at 3:30 in the morning, but the fires burn for days. Hamburg's fire services, reinforced by units from surrounding cities, fight to contain the blaze, but their efforts are futile. Entire neighborhoods are reduced to ash and rubble, block after block. Nothing remains but blackened shells and twisted metal. The casualty count is staggering. Official estimates place the death toll at 42,600, though the true number may be higher. Bodies are so thoroughly incinerated that identification is impossible. Mass graves are dug, filled with charred remains and ashes. Families will never know if their loved ones are buried there or scattered as dust. 1 million people flee Hamburg in the days following the attack. Trains, overloaded beyond capacity, carry refugees to rural areas. Roads are clogged with carts, bicycles, and pedestrians carrying whatever they salvaged. The exodus is the largest in German history to that point. The city's population drops from 1.7 million to 700,000. Industrial damage is significant but not crippling. Shipyards, refineries, and factories suffer hits, but production resumes within weeks. Dispersed manufacturing and rapid repairs mitigate long-term impact. The raid's psychological effect exceeds its material destruction. Hamburg proves that no German city is safe, that defenses cannot stop mass bombing, that total war reaches into bedrooms and basements. Nazi propaganda struggles to respond. Goebbels frames the bombing as British terrorism, evidence of enemy barbarity. Radio broadcasts emphasize civilian suffering, martyrdom, and the need for revenge. But the propaganda cannot erase fear. Germans in other cities stockpile water, clear cellars, and prepare for their turn. Allied aircrews debriefed after the mission, report seeing flames visible from 200 miles away. Pilots describe flying through turbulence caused by rising heat. Bomb aimers describe Hamburg glowing like a furnace. Some express satisfaction, justified retaliation for the Blitz, for Coventry, for the war Germany started. Others are disturbed, troubled by the scale of destruction and civilian death. The firestorm tactic is repeated. Dresden in February 1945 experiences a similar fate, another firestorm, another 25,000 dead. Tokyo in March 1945 suffers worse, 100,000 killed in a single night. Hamburg is the prototype, the first deliberate creation of a firestorm, the proof of concept for area bombing. Ethical debates begin immediately and persist for decades. Was the bombing justified? Did it shorten the war by undermining German morale and production? Or was it a war crime? Indiscriminate slaughter of civilians? The questions have no consensus answers. Participants and historians argue both sides, citing military necessity against moral restraint. For the survivors, debate is irrelevant. They lived through literal hell. They watched families incinerate, cities vanish, and worlds end. The trauma never leaves. Hamburg survivors develop chronic anxiety, nightmares, and phobias of fire. Children who escaped carry psychological scars into old age. The firestorm burned buildings, but it also burned minds. Reconstruction begins within months. Labor is mobilized, prisoners, forced workers, civilians. Rubble is cleared, streets reopened. Essential services restored. The rebuilding is pragmatic, not sentimental. Hamburg must function, must continue producing ships and submarines, must contribute to the war effort. Aesthetics are irrelevant. By war's end, Hamburg has endured 213 air raids, though none match the July 1943 firestorm. The city's architecture is permanently altered. Pre-war Hamburg, with its historic buildings and merchant houses, is gone. Post-war Hamburg is concrete, functional, modern, a city rebuilt from ashes. The bombing proves that air power can destroy cities, but cannot break nations. Germany fights on for 21 months after Hamburg. Production continues, armies are reinforced, and resistance stiffens. The firestorm kills tens of thousands, but does not achieve strategic victory. That will require armies on the ground, grinding through Germany from east and west, occupying every mile. But on the night of July 24, 1943, those conclusions are distant. There is only fire, wind, and death. Hamburg burns and the world watches. The age of total war has arrived, and no one, soldier or civilian, is exempt from its reach. Tokyo, 1944. The war, distant for years, arrives home. American submarines strangle supply routes. Rice, once abundant, is rationed to 330 grams per person per day, barely enough to sustain life. Miso paste, soy sauce, and fish become luxuries reserved for special occasions or obtained through black markets. The Japanese home front, already austere, tightens into near starvation. The Tonoregumi system governs daily life. Neighborhood associations, typically 10 to 20 households, enforce government directives, distribute rations, and monitor compliance. Each association has a leader, appointed and accountable to local authorities. The leader ensures that rations are collected, air raid drills are attended, and suspicious activity is reported. The system is efficient, intrusive, and totalizing. Rationing is hierarchical. Industrial workers receive larger portions than office workers. Soldiers' families receive priority over civilians. Children and pregnant women receive supplements, powdered milk, vitamins. Those supplies are irregular. The elderly and infirm receive the least, a tacit acknowledgement that their survival is lowest priority in a nation fighting for existence. Silk kimonos, heirlooms passed through generations, are traded for rice. Women barter jewelry, pottery, and furniture. The exchanges are humiliating, symbols of family honor reduced to currency for survival. But hunger overrides pride. A kilogram of rice buys weeks of life. A kimono is just cloth. Children are mobilized. Students as young as 12 work in factories, farms, and construction projects. School schedules are reduced to half days. Academics subordinated to labor. They assemble munitions, dig air raid trenches, and harvest crops. The work is dangerous. Industrial accidents kill or maim children regularly. Families accept the risk, or at least do not resist, because refusal means accusations of disloyalty. Air raid drills are weekly rituals. Sirens wail, and residents rush to designated shelters, basements, subway stations, or simple trenches dug in parks. Drills emphasize speed and discipline. Families practice dousing incendiary bombs with water or sand, using long bamboo poles to push burning material off roofs. The training is practical. American B-29 bombers have begun appearing over Japanese cities, and firebombing is imminent. Propaganda saturates public space. Posters exhort sacrifice. Luxury is the enemy. Desire nothing until victory. Radio broadcasts blend news, heavily censored, with martial music and speeches emphasizing endurance, loyalty, and the divine mission of the Japanese Empire. Schools teach that death in service to the emperor is the highest honor. Children recite slogans praising sacrifice and condemning selfishness. The black market flourishes despite harsh penalties. Rice, eggs, and sake trade at 5 to 10 times official prices. Farmers hide produce from government requisitions, selling it secretly to urban middlemen. Police conduct raids, confiscating goods and arresting traders, but corruption is widespread. Some police participate in the trade, others accept bribes to ignore it. Women's roles expand. With men conscripted, women manage households, farms, and small businesses. They join labor units, working in munitions factories, textile mills, and transportation. The work is exhausting, the pay minimal. Propaganda frames their labor as patriotic duty, though the reality is economic necessity. Without women's work, the economy collapses. Spirituality intensifies. Shinto rituals, emphasizing purity and devotion, become more prominent. Families visit shrines to pray for soldiers' safety. Amulets and charms are distributed, promising divine protection. The state encourages this religiosity, blending nationalism with spirituality to sustain morale. Belief in ultimate victory, however distant or implausible, is maintained through faith more than evidence. Kamikaze pilots are glorified. Young men, selected for suicide missions, are honored in public ceremonies before departure. They drink sake, sing patriotic songs, and write final letters to families. The letters are formulaic, expressions of duty, honor, and gratitude, rarely revealing fear or doubt. The pilots are portrayed as heroes willingly sacrificing themselves. The reality is more complex. Many are volunteers, driven by indoctrination and social pressure. Others are selected with minimal choice. Refusal means dishonor, not just for the individual but for his entire family. Urban populations shrink as strategic evacuation begins. Children are sent to rural areas, separated from parents for safety. The separations echo British evacuations but occur under harsher conditions. Host families in rural areas, already struggling with food shortages, resent additional mouths to feed. Some children endure neglect or abuse. Others find kindness. All experience profound dislocation. Industrial production falters. Raw material shortages cripple manufacturing. Steel, aluminum, and rubber, imported before the war, are now scarce. Factories improvise, substituting inferior materials and reducing quality. Aircraft are built with wood and fabric replacing metal. Engines are less reliable. The decline is masked by propaganda, but workers see the reality. Bombing intensifies in late 1944. B-29 bombers, flying from newly captured bases in the Mariana Islands, strike Japanese cities with increasing frequency. The raids are initially high-altitude precision attacks on industrial targets. Results are poor, cloud cover obscures targets, and accuracy is low. In March 1945, the strategy shifts to low-altitude firebombing. The devastation of Tokyo will exceed Hamburg, but in 1944, that horror is still future. Morale is brittle. Public displays remain patriotic, flags waving, slogans chanted, unity proclaimed. But privately, doubt festers. Families whisper about losses, about shortages, about the relentless American advance across the Pacific. News of defeats is suppressed or reframed as tactical withdrawals. But reality seeps through. Letters from soldiers, heavily censored, still convey desperation. Silence from sons and husbands tells its own story. The government responds with intensified indoctrination. Radio broadcasts emphasize the enemy's barbarism, claiming that surrender means annihilation. Civilians are urged to prepare for invasion, to fight with bamboo spears and farm tools if necessary. The rhetoric of death before dishonor becomes official policy. The prospect of national suicide, rather than surrender, is presented as noble. Children absorb this messaging. They believe, with the conviction of youth, that sacrifice is glorious and victory inevitable. They do not yet understand that they are being prepared to die. When the end comes, in August 1945, many will struggle to reconcile indoctrination with defeat, propaganda with reality. But in 1944, the end seems distant. There is only rationing, labor drills, and the tightening grip of scarcity. The Japanese home front endures, not because it has hope, but because endurance is the only option remaining. Bletchley Park, England, 1943. 50 miles northwest of London, in the grounds of a Victorian mansion, 10,000 people work in shifts around the clock. Most are women. Most are under 30. None can discuss their work with family, friends, or even colleagues in different departments. They are code breakers, and their work is the most secret operation of the war. The German Enigma machine is the target. Used by Wehrmacht, Kriegsmarine, and Luftwaffe, Enigma encrypts messages into seemingly random text. The machine resembles a typewriter with rotors and plugboard. Operators type plain text, Enigma scrambles it into ciphertext. The recipient, using an identically configured machine, decrypts the message. Without knowing the rotor settings and plugboard connections, changed daily, decryption is mathematically near impossible. But near impossible is not impossible. Polish mathematicians in the 1930s made initial breakthroughs. By 1939, they shared their findings with Britain and France. British cryptanalysts, led by mathematician Alan Turing, advanced the work. Turing designs the bombe, an electromechanical device that tests thousands of rotor configurations per hour, searching for settings that produce sensible German text. The bombs operate in huts, temporary buildings crowded onto Bletchley's grounds. Each bombe is the size of a wardrobe, filled with rotating drums and wiring. They clatter constantly, a rhythmic mechanical noise that permeates the huts. Operators, mostly women's Royal Naval Service members, monitor the machine's loading configurations and recording results. The work is tedious and exacting. A single error invalidates hours of processing. When a bomb finds a potential solution, the output is passed to cryptanalysts who verify it. If correct, the day's Enigma settings are known, and intercepted messages can be decrypted. The intelligence, code-named Ultra, is sent to military commanders via secure channels. Recipients are forbidden from acting on Ultra if doing so would reveal that Enigma is compromised. Sometimes, this means sacrificing opportunities to preserve the secret. The system is not foolproof. Enigma settings change daily at midnight Berlin time. Each day requires fresh decryption. Some days the bombs fail to find solutions. Other days, solutions arrive too late to be actionable. But over time, Ultra provides invaluable intelligence. U-boat locations, troop movements, supply schedules, strategic plans. In the Pacific, American cryptanalysts break Japanese codes. The purple cipher used for diplomatic communication is solved in 1940. JMen 25, the Imperial Japanese Navy's operational code, is partially readable by mid-1942. The intelligence enables critical victories. Midway, in June 1942, is won partly because American commanders know Japanese plans in advance. The workers at Bletchley and similar facilities have no complete picture. They see fragments, decrypted sentences, isolated messages. Only senior analysts assemble fragments into intelligence. This compartmentalization enhances security, but also isolates workers. A woman operating a bomb does not know if her work contributed to sinking a U-boat or locating a panzer division. She knows only that her task is essential and secret. Secrecy is enforced brutally. Workers sign the Official Secrets Act, legally binding them to silence. They are warned that breaches endanger lives and the war effort. Social interactions are monitored. Letters are censored. Even after the war, silence is required. Many Bletchley veterans, do not discuss their work until the 1970s, when declassification permits limited disclosure. The psychological burden is significant. Workers cannot share stress with loved ones. Successes cannot be celebrated publicly. Failures cannot be mourned openly. The isolation is compounded by shift work, rotating between days, evenings, and nights, which disrupts social life and sleep. Exhaustion is chronic, yet camaraderie develops. Workers form friendships, constrained by secrecy but genuine. They share meals in cafeterias, attend dances organized for morale, and find humor in the absurdity of their situation. Gallows humor is common. Jokes about Nazi incompetence, about the tedium of machines, about the war dragging endlessly. Women comprise 75% of Bletchley's workforce. They operate bombs, translate decrypted German text, and perform clerical work. Despite their critical contributions, they receive less recognition and lower pay than male colleagues. Post-war, many are expected to return to domestic roles, their wartime expertise dismissed as temporary necessity. Alan Turing, brilliant and eccentric, becomes a symbol of Bletchley's success. His theoretical work underpins the bomb's design. But he is also homosexual, a crime in 1940s Britain. His sexuality remains hidden during the war, but will later lead to prosecution, chemical castration, and suicide. The tragedy is profound. A man who helped win the war is destroyed by the society he saved. The intelligence produced at Bletchley and similar centers shortens the war. Historians estimate that Ultra reduces the European war by 2 years, saving countless lives. In the Atlantic, U-boat locations revealed by decrypted messages allow convoys to evade wolf packs. In North Africa, Rommel's supply shipments, betrayed by intercepted orders, are sunk by Allied aircraft. But the cost is also human. Workers endure stress, secrecy, and exhaustion. Some suffer breakdowns, unable to cope with the pressure. Others develop chronic health issues from poor diet, inadequate rest, and relentless workload. The quiet rooms of Bletchley Park extract a toll as surely as battlefields. Though the wounds are invisible, when the war ends, the machines are destroyed, bombs are dismantled, documents burned, and the facility repurposed. Churchill orders that the secret be maintained indefinitely. For decades, the public believes the war was won by conventional military superiority alone. The truth, that mathematics, logic, and quiet determination in English country estates played decisive roles, remains hidden. The legacy of Bletchley extends beyond the war. Turing's theoretical work on computation, developed partly through code breaking, lays foundations for modern computers. The organizational methods, teamwork, specialization, information compartmentalization, influence post-war intelligence agencies. The lesson is clear: war is fought not only with guns but with information, and those who control information shape outcomes. Normandy, France. June 1940, a soldier steps on a mine. The explosion severs his right leg below the knee and shreds his left thigh. He falls, screaming, blood pumping from the femoral artery. His squadmates hit the ground, scanning for more mines. The medic, carrying 40 pounds of equipment, crawls forward. Time begins its race against death. The Golden Hour concept governs battlefield medicine. If a wounded soldier reaches surgical care within 60 minutes, survival odds are high. Beyond 60 minutes, odds plummet. The medic's job is to stabilize and evacuate within that window. He has morphine, sulfur powder, bandages, and plasma. He also has training, 6 weeks of intensive instruction in trauma care, anatomy, and emergency procedures. First, stop the bleeding. The medic applies a tourniquet above the knee, twisting it tight until the hemorrhaging slows. The soldier screams louder. Morphine comes next, a syringe, like a toothpaste tube with a needle, injected into the thigh. The soldier's pupils dilate, the screaming fades to moaning. The medic marks an M on the soldier's forehead in grease pencil, indicating morphine administered to prevent overdose at subsequent aid stations. Sulfur powder is sprinkled into the wounds, a white powder that prevents bacterial infection. Sulfur drugs, introduced in the late 1930s, revolutionized battlefield medicine by reducing infection rates. Before sulfur, minor wounds often festered into gangrene, requiring amputation or causing death. With sulfur, survival rates improve dramatically. Bandages come next, pressure dressings applied tightly to control residual bleeding. The medic works quickly, efficiently. ignoring incoming fire. He wears a Red Cross armband, theoretically protecting him under Geneva Conventions. In practice, the protection is inconsistent. Some enemy soldiers respect medics, others shoot them deliberately, knowing that killing a medic demoralizes units and reduces survival rates. Evacuation begins. Stretcher bearers. 2 soldiers assigned to carry wounded, lift the injured man and move toward the battalion aid station, typically 200 to 500 yards behind the front line. The journey is agonizing. Every jostle causes pain. The wounded scream, plead, or fall silent from shock. Stretcher bearers move as quickly as terrain allows, navigating shell craters, barbed wire, and enemy fire. The battalion aid station is a tent or dugout staffed by a medical officer and assistants. Here, triage occurs. Wounded are categorized immediate, delayed, minimal, and expectant. The expectant are given morphine and placed aside, priority given to those with better chances. Plasma transfusions stabilize shock. Plasma, blood with cells removed, can be stored and transported without refrigeration. Donors in the United States provide blood. It is processed into plasma and shipped overseas in bottles. Medics administer plasma intravenously, replacing lost fluid and raising blood pressure. The transfusions buy time, keeping patients alive long enough to reach surgical facilities. Ambulances, jeeps converted with litter racks or dedicated ambulance trucks, transport patients from battalion aid stations to field hospitals. The rides are rough. Roads are cratered, vehicles lack suspension, and drivers prioritize speed over comfort. Wounded are stacked in tiers, morphine, dulled but conscious, hearing the groans of others and feeling every bump. Field hospitals are located miles behind the front, in commandeered buildings, tents, or semi-permanent structures. Surgical teams, doctors, nurses, anesthetists work in assembly line fashion. Patients are anesthetized with ether or sodium pentothal, prepped, and operated on in rapid succession. The focus is damage control, stop bleeding, remove shrapnel, debride dead tissue, stabilize fractures. Definitive repairs are deferred to rear area hospitals. Penicillin, introduced in 1943, transforms infection treatment. Supply is limited. Penicillin is reserved for severe infections and wounded with best survival prospects. Black market penicillin emerges, stolen from military stocks and sold at exorbitant prices. Survival rates are unprecedented. In World War I, 8% of wounded American soldiers died. In World War II, the rate drops to 4.5%. The improvement reflects better triage, faster evacuation, plasma transfusions, sulfur drugs, penicillin, and surgical skill. Yet the numbers obscure individuals suffering. Medics are revered and resented. Soldiers depend on them, knowing medics are the difference between life and death. But medics also witness horrors that combatants do not. The psychological toll on medics is severe. Post-war, many develop alcoholism, depression, or post-traumatic stress disorder. They dream of blood, screaming, and the faces of men they could not save. Nurses, mostly women, work in field hospitals under conditions nearly as dangerous as front lines. A surgical nurse might assist in 20 operations per shift, standing for 18 hours, covered in blood, breathing ether fumes. The Red Cross provides auxiliary support. Blood donation campaigns emphasize the direct link between civilian contribution and soldier survival. Posters declare, "Your blood can save a life." Millions of Americans donate. When the war ends, battlefield medicine's innovations persist. Trauma surgery techniques improve civilian emergency care. Helicopter evacuation, pioneered in the war's final months, becomes standard. The golden hour shapes modern emergency medical systems. But in June 1944, those legacies are unimaginable. There is only the medic, the wounded soldier, and the ticking clock, 60 minutes. Every second counts. Stalag Luft III, Germany, 1943. The prisoner of war camp sprawls across sandy pine forest northeast of Berlin. It houses Allied airmen, British, American, Canadian, and others, shot down over occupied Europe. The camp is designed to be escape-proof, 10-foot barbed wire fences, guard towers with machine guns, seismic detectors to sense tunneling, and searchlights that sweep the compound nightly. Daily life is regimented. Roll call occurs twice daily, morning and evening. Prisoners assemble in formation while German guards count. The count must match camp records exactly. Discrepancies trigger lockdowns and searches. Roll call can last hours in winter, prisoners standing in freezing cold while guards recount obsessively. Barracks are wooden structures, each housing 50 to 80 men in bunk beds. Heating is minimal, a single stove per barracks, fueled by coal rations insufficient for winter temperatures. Prisoners sleep in layers, wearing all available clothing, sharing blankets. Frostbite is common, so are colds, flu, and respiratory infections that spread rapidly through crowded quarters. Food is the primary obsession. The Geneva Convention requires captors to feed prisoners adequately, but adequate is interpreted minimally. Daily rations consist of black bread, ersatz coffee, thin soup, and occasionally potatoes or turnips. Calories are insufficient, perhaps 1,200 to 1,500 per day for men who need 2,500 to maintain weight. Prisoners lose weight steadily, becoming gaunt and weak. Red Cross parcels are salvation. Each parcel, intended for one man for 1 week, contains spam, chocolate, powdered milk, coffee, cigarettes, soap, and other goods. The parcels supplement inadequate German rations, preventing starvation. But delivery is irregular. Supply interruptions, Allied bombing of railways, German confiscation, mean weeks without parcels. During these gaps, hunger intensifies. Cigarettes become currency. A prisoner who does not smoke can trade cigarettes for extra food, clothing, or services. Exchange rates fluctuate based on supply. 50 cigarettes might buy a watch, 5 a razor blade. The economy is sophisticated, with prisoners bartering, speculating, and even establishing informal banks that loan cigarettes at interest. Boredom is the second great enemy. Days are empty. There is no productive work, no meaningful activity. Prisoners improvise. They organize classes, languages, mathematics, history, taught by educated inmates. They form theater groups, staging plays with improvised costumes and sets. They create orchestras, using instruments donated by relief agencies. The cultural activities sustain morale and provide structure. Sports are popular. Prisoners construct volleyball and soccer fields, holding competitions between barracks or nationalities. The games are fiercely contested, offering brief escapes from captivity. Spectators cheer, gamble on outcomes, and relive the illusion of normalcy. Escape attempts are continuous. Despite the camp's security, prisoners dig tunnels, forge documents, and plan elaborate schemes. Stalag Luft 3 becomes famous for the Great Escape, a mass breakout in March 1944. Over months, prisoners dig 3 tunnels, code-named Tom, Dick, and Harry. The tunnels extend 300 feet beyond the wire, deep enough to avoid seismic detectors. The tunneling is extraordinary engineering. Prisoners use improvised tools, knives, spoons, tin cans fashioned into shovels. They shore up tunnel walls with bed slats. They ventilate using hand-pumped bellows made from kit bags. Dirt excavated from tunnels, hundreds of tons, is dispersed covertly, carried in bags hidden under coats and emptied into gardens and latrines. On March 24, 1944, 76 prisoners escape through Harry. The operation is meticulous, but luck fails. A guard discovers the tunnel exit before all planned escapees exit. The alarm is raised. German police and military launch massive manhunts. 73 escapees are recaptured within days. Hitler orders all recaptured prisoners shot. Luftwaffe commanders refuse to comply fully. 50 prisoners are executed anyway. The murders shock the camp and violate international law. For the prisoners who remain, life continues in grim routine. News from the outside arrives through clandestine radios, smuggled components assembled into receivers hidden in barracks. Prisoners listen to BBC broadcasts, learning of Allied advances. The news sustains hope but also frustrates. Freedom is coming but agonizingly slowly. Letters are the other connection to the outside world. Prisoners are allowed to send and receive mail, though heavily censored. Letters home are limited to 1 or 2 per month, restricted to a single page, and read by censors who redact sensitive information. Incoming letters are similarly censored, despite restrictions. Letters are treasured, proof that families remember, that life continues beyond barbed wire. Conditions in camps vary widely by location and captors. Stalag Luft 3, holding Western Allied officers, is relatively humane compared to camps in Eastern Europe or those holding Soviet prisoners. Of 5 million Soviet soldiers captured, 3 million die in captivity, a 57% death rate compared to 5% for Western Pardalus in German camps. Japanese POW camps are notoriously brutal. Allied soldiers captured in the Pacific face starvation rations, tropical diseases, and forced labor on projects like the Burma Railway, where 12,000 PUs die building a rail line through jungle. For prisoners, captivity is suspended animation. Life continues: meals, sleep, conversation, but meaning drains away. Liberation might come tomorrow or never. Families age unseen. Children grow up without fathers. When liberation finally comes, in April-May 1945, the joy is tempered by disorientation. Many have been captive for years. Reintegration is difficult. Some adapt, others struggle for decades. But in 1943, liberation is distant hope. There is only the camp, the fence, the guards, and the endless waiting. Survival is the only victory available. June 6, 1944, Normandy, France. The invasion begins at dawn. Allied naval guns pound German coastal defenses. Bombers saturate inland targets. Paratroopers drop behind enemy lines. And in the villages between the beaches and the Bocage countryside, French civilians wake to war arriving at their doorsteps. The bombardment is indiscriminate. Entire towns, Caen, Saint-Elve-Valognes, are designated as tactical objectives. The result is the obliteration of urban centers where thousands of civilians live. Caen, a city of 60,000, is bombed on D-Day evening. 400 RAF bombers drop 2,500 tons of explosives in 45 minutes. The medieval city center, buildings dating to the 11th century, collapses into rubble. Fires rage through the night. The death toll in Caen exceeds 2,000 civilians in the first weeks. The city becomes a battlefield, contested house by house. Civilians endure weeks without food, water, or sanitation. Saint-Elve suffers similarly. Pre-invasion bombing reduces 95% of the town to ruins. The bombing kills 300 immediately, with hundreds more dying later from injuries, disease, and starvation. Displacement is massive. 2 million French civilians flee combat zones during summer 1944. Roads clog with refugees, slowing military traffic and complicating logistics. French authorities attempt relief. Shelters open in schools and churches, but resources are inadequate. Refugees endure weeks in overcrowded conditions, sharing meager rations. German forces retreating, plant mines and booby traps. Death continues long after battles move on. A child picking wildflowers triggers a mine. A farmer plowing detonates unexploded ordnance. Liberation is complex. Gratitude coexists with grief. Some villages survive untouched, others are erased. The pattern is arbitrary. Food relief is delayed. Black markets flourish. American soldiers sometimes share rations, though officially discouraged. Reprisals follow liberation. Women accused of collaboration are publicly shamed. Men accused are arrested, tried hastily, sometimes executed. The purges are chaotic and often unjust. Reconstruction begins slowly. Rubble must be cleared. Labor is mobilized. Accidents kill workers daily. For children, the trauma is profound. Many are orphaned. Orphanages overflow. Families take in unrelated children out of necessity. Normandy is rebuilt over decades, but survivors carry memories. The sound of bombs, the smell of burning, the sight of bodies in streets. Liberation comes at a price measured in rubble and corpses. The armies move on. The civilians remain rebuilding from ashes. November 1944, Western Netherlands. The liberation that swept through France stalls at the Rhine. Montgomery's Operation Market Garden, an ambitious attempt to seize bridges and outflank German defenses, fails. Allied forces dig in for winter, and 4.5 million Dutch civilians, trapped in German-occupied territory, face starvation. The hunger winter begins with a German embargo. In retaliation for Dutch railway strikes supporting Allied operations, German authorities halt all food and fuel transport into Western Netherlands. The embargo is collective punishment, explicitly designed to inflict suffering. The timing is catastrophic, winter approaching, food stocks low, and no resupply possible. Rations, already inadequate, collapse. By December, official rations drop to 1,000 calories per day. By January, 580 calories. By April, 400 calories, equivalent to 2 slices of bread. The rations are theoretical, actual distribution is lower and irregular. Bakeries have no flour. Grocers have no stock. Markets stand empty. People eat anything. Tulip bulbs. normally poisonous, are boiled repeatedly to remove toxins and eaten as a mush. Sugar beets intended for livestock are dug from frozen ground and consumed. Grass, stinging nettles, and tree bark are tried, though they provide no nutrition and cause digestive agony. Fuel vanishes. Coal and wood, requisitioned by Germans or simply unavailable, leave homes unheated. Families burn furniture, books, and floorboards. Public parks are stripped, trees cut for firewood, leaving stumps and desolation. The cold is relentless. Indoor temperatures drop below freezing. Frostbite is endemic. Urban populations are trapped. Farmers in rural areas have some access to food, though German requisitions take most produce. City dwellers, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague, have nothing. They cannot farm. Black markets offer food at prices no one can afford. A loaf of bread costs 200 guilders, a week's wage before the war. The hunger trek begins. Desperate urbanites walk into the countryside, hoping to trade possessions for food. They push carts or carry bags, traveling 20, 30, 40 kilometers to farming villages. They knock on doors, offering jewelry, clothing, furniture, family heirlooms for potatoes. Farmers, themselves struggling, sometimes accept. Often, they turn people away, having nothing to spare. The treks are lethal. Winter cold, weakened bodies, and malnutrition combine fatally. People collapse on roadsides, dying of exposure or heart failure. Their bodies are left where they fall, too numerous for proper burial. Survivors stepping over corpses becomes routine, horror normalized by repetition. Children suffer most visibly. Malnutrition stunts growth, weakens bones, and damages organs. Infants born during the hunger winter are underweight and fragile. Many die within days. Those who survive face lifelong health consequences: heart disease, diabetes, mental illness traced to prenatal malnutrition. Hospitals operate without heat, medicine, or food. Doctors perform surgery by candlelight, lacking anesthesia or antibiotics. Patients die not from injuries but from weakness, bodies too frail to heal. Morgues overflow. Mass graves are dug in frozen ground, filled with emaciated corpses wrapped in paper because cloth is too valuable to waste on the dead. The elderly and frail die first. Weakened by age or illness, they cannot survive prolonged starvation. By spring 1940, 5 nursing homes and care facilities are graveyards, residents dead in beds, staff too weak to remove them. The death toll rises. 22,000 confirmed deaths, though true numbers may be higher, some dying unreported and unrecorded. Morale disintegrates. The optimism of liberation, anticipated in September 1944, is crushed by the realization that freedom will not come before spring at earliest. Families fracture under stress. Parents prioritize children, sacrificing their own rations. Siblings fight over scraps. Marriages dissolve when one spouse steals food from the other. Desperation breeds crime. Theft of food is rampant. Burglaries target homes suspected of hidden stores. Looters strip abandoned buildings. Police, themselves starving, rarely intervene. Society's veneer of order erodes, revealing primal competition for survival. Yet solidarity persists. Neighbors share what little they have. Churches organize soup kitchens, distributing watery broths to hundreds daily. The soup is nutritionally worthless, but psychologically vital. Proof that community survives even in extremity. The Germans occupying the region do not starve. They requisition food for themselves, feeding their soldiers while Dutch civilians die. The cruelty is deliberate. Starvation is policy, a weapon as deadly as bullets. In April 1945, hope arrives. Negotiations between Allies and German commanders result in Operation Manna. British and Canadian aircraft drop food parcels over Dutch cities. The drops are coordinated with German forces, who agree not to fire on low-flying bombers. The agreement is unprecedented: combatants suspending hostilities to save civilians. The planes come in low, flying at 400 feet to ensure accurate drops. Sacks of flour, canned goods, chocolate, and dried milk tumble from bomb bays. Civilians rush into streets, waving, crying, overwhelmed with relief. The drops provide enough food to prevent further mass death, though full recovery requires weeks. Liberation comes in early May. Canadian forces enter Western Netherlands, greeted by skeletal survivors. The soldiers, hardened by years of combat, are shaken by what they find. Emaciated civilians, mass graves, entire populations on the brink of extinction. The hunger winter leaves deep scars. Survivors carry trauma, nightmares of starvation, hoarding behaviors, inability to waste food. Children born during the famine face lifelong health issues. The event is seared into Dutch national memory, commemorated annually. Research later reveals epigenetic effects, malnutrition altering gene expression, transmitted to descendants. Biology itself bears the imprint of suffering. But in April 1945, such reflections are distant. There is only relief, food falling from the sky, liberation approaching, survival assured. Freedom, when it comes, tastes like bread. January 27, 1945, Auschwitz-Birkenau occupied Poland. Soviet forces of the 60th Army enter the camp. They expect a prisoner of war facility. What they find defies comprehension. 7,000 survivors, skeletal and disease-ridden, wander among barracks and crematoria. The evidence of industrial-scale murder lies in piles. Human hair, eyeglasses, shoes, gold teeth extracted from corpses. Auschwitz is the largest and deadliest of the Nazi extermination camps. Between 1940 and 1945, approximately 1.1 million people are murdered there, 90% of them Jews. The rest are Poles, Roma, Soviet prisoners, and others deemed undesirable by Nazi ideology. The complex includes Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II Birkenau, and Auschwitz III Monowitz. The murder process is systematic. Trains arrive packed with deportees. Victims, men, women, children, are unloaded on ramps. SS doctors conduct selections pointing left or right. Those sent right, young, healthy, capable of labor, are registered and assigned to work. Those sent left, the elderly, children, the weak, are told they will shower. They are led to gas chambers disguised as bathhouses. The gas chambers use Zyklone B, a cyanide-based pesticide. Victims are packed into sealed rooms, hundreds at a time. Pellets are dropped through vents. Death comes in minutes. Bodies are removed by Sonderkommandos, Jewish prisoners forced to dispose of corpses. Gold teeth are extracted. Hair is shorn for industrial use. Bodies are burned in crematoria or open pits. At peak operation in 1944, Auschwitz murders 6,000 people per day. The crematoria operate continuously but cannot keep pace. Open-air pits supplement the furnaces, pyres visible and smellable for miles. Liberating Soviet soldiers are hardened veterans, yet Auschwitz shocks them. Survivors weigh 70 to 80 pounds. Many die in the days following liberation, too weak to recover even with medical care. Bergen-Belsen is liberated by British forces on April 15, 1945. At liberation, 60,000 prisoners are crammed into a space designed for 10,000. There is no food, no water, no sanitation. 10,000 corpses lie unburied. Typhus rages unchecked. Despite relief efforts, 13,000 more die in the weeks following liberation. Feeding must be done slowly. Refeeding syndrome can kill. British doctors develop protocols under crisis conditions. Dachau is liberated by American forces on April 29, 1945. 32,000 prisoners survive. Nearby 39 railway cars filled with corpses are discovered. Evacuation transports turn mobile graves. Some American soldiers shoot surrendering SS guards. Investigations follow. No prosecutions result. Evidence from the camps becomes the foundation of the Nuremberg trials. Documents, blueprints, transport lists, and survivor testimony establish crimes against humanity and genocide as legal categories. Survivors face long recoveries. Many are sole survivors of entire families. Homes are occupied, communities erased, some emigrate. Others remain haunted. The scale becomes clear: 6 million Jews murdered, 5 million others, Poles, Roma, Soviet civilians, disabled people, political prisoners, homosexuals, also killed. Numbers become abstractions, yet each represents a life extinguished. Debate follows. Who knew? When? Could more have been done? Allied intelligence received reports by 1942. Action did not follow. Military victory was prioritized over rescue. For survivors, debate is meaningless. They endured hell. Their testimony ensures memory. The camps are preserved. Auschwitz, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen become memorials and warnings. But preservation cannot restore the dead. It cannot answer how this happened. The camps revealed in 1945 force humanity to confront its capacity for evil, a confrontation that is still unfinished. December 16, 1944, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. German forces launch a massive surprise offensive. the last major German attack on the Western Front. Hitler gambles everything on a desperate drive to split Allied forces, capture Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The attack achieves initial surprise, penetrating American lines and creating chaos. But the offensive is doomed by a fundamental flaw: fuel. The plan requires capturing Allied fuel depots. German panzers have fuel for 100 kilometers, enough to reach objectives if captured depots provide resupply. The gamble is that American forces, caught off guard, will abandon fuel stocks intact. The assumption proves fatally wrong. The weather is brutal. Temperatures drop to -20 degrees Fahrenheit. Snow falls heavily, covering roads and forests. Visibility is near zero. The cold is a weapon as lethal as bullets. German soldiers, inadequately clothed in wool uniforms designed for moderate climates, suffer frostbite within hours. American forces, also unprepared for the severity, endure similar conditions. The offensive begins with artillery barrages at 5:30 a.m. German guns fire continuously for 90 minutes, targeting American positions across an 85-mile front. The bombardment shatters the quiet of what Americans assumed was a safe, rear area sector. Green American divisions, units recently arrived, untested in combat, are overrun in the initial assault. 410,000 German troops attack 80,000 Americans. The numerical advantage creates breakthroughs. Panzer columns advance rapidly, exploiting gaps, bypassing strongpoints. By evening, German forces have penetrated 10 miles into Allied lines. Panic spreads. American units retreat in confusion. Roads clog with vehicles fleeing east. But fuel shortages appear immediately. Panzer divisions consume fuel faster than predicted. Cross-country movement through snow and forests drains tanks. The Ardennes terrain, dense woods, narrow roads, steep hills, is unsuited for mechanized warfare. Tanks bog down, burn fuel maneuvering, and fall behind schedule. Kampfgruppe Paper, an SS Panzer unit under Joachim Paper, leads the spearhead. Paper's objective is to seize bridges over the Meuse River, then drive to Antwerp. His column includes 70 tanks and assault guns, supported by infantry in half-tracks. But fuel runs low within 2 days. Paper's units overrun American supply dumps, but find them destroyed or empty. American engineers retreating demolish fuel stocks rather than leaving them intact. On December 17, Paper's forces commit the Malmedy massacre, executing 84 American prisoners of war in a field. The killings violate Geneva Conventions and galvanize American resistance. Word spreads quickly: Germans are taking no prisoners. American soldiers fight harder, knowing surrender means death. The weather grounds aircraft. Both sides rely on air support, but clouds, snow, and fog prevent flying. German planners counted on weather neutralizing Allied air superiority. The calculation proves correct initially. The Luftwaffe cannot fly either. But the absence of Allied bombers allows German columns to move during daylight without being strafed. American forces regroup. General Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, shifts reserves: 101st Airborne to Bastogne, 82nd Airborne to the northern shoulder. Bastogne, a critical road junction, becomes the battle's focal point. The town must be held to prevent German advances west. The 101st Airborne reaches Bastogne on December 19, just before German forces encircle it. 10,000 American paratroopers and armored units dig in, surrounded by 50,000 Germans. The siege begins. German commanders demand surrender. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, acting division commander, responds with a single word: nuts. The refusal becomes legendary. Inside Bastogne, conditions deteriorate. Supplies are limited. Ammunition is rationed. Medical supplies run short. Wounded lie in makeshift aid stations. Cellars and churches, without adequate anesthesia or antibiotics. Food is scarce. Soldiers share rations, often skipping meals to stretch supplies. The cold is unrelenting. Foxholes fill with snow. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, noses. Fuel shortages cripple the German offensive. By December 22, Paper's spearhead, now 60 miles behind Allied lines, is immobilized. His tanks sit empty, useless. American forces counterattack, cutting off Paper's retreat. He abandons vehicles and escapes on foot with 800 men, leaving behind his entire column. Tanks, guns, vehicles, intact but fuelless. The weather clears on December 23. Allied aircraft launch immediately. bombers striking German columns, fighters strafing supply lines, transport planes dropping supplies to Bastogne. The airdrops saved the garrison. Bundles of ammunition, medical supplies, and food parachute into the perimeter. Accuracy is imperfect. Some bundles land in German-controlled areas, but enough reach American forces to sustain resistance. Patton's Third Army, racing north from Luxembourg, reaches Bastogne on December 26. The siege is broken. German forces, fuel-starved and battered by air attacks, begin withdrawing. The offensive has failed. The Battle of the Bulge, named for the bulge created in Allied lines, costs 89,000 American casualties, 19,000 killed, 47,500 wounded, 23,000 captured or missing. German losses are higher, 100,000 casualties, including killed, wounded, and captured. More critically, Germany loses 600 tanks and assault guns, irreplaceable given collapsing industrial production. The failure is logistical. German planners built a strategy dependent on capturing enemy supplies. When American forces denied them fuel, the offensive stalled. Tactical brilliance, surprise, concentration of force, aggressive leadership could not overcome supply reality. The cold kills as effectively as combat. Frostbite cases exceed battle wounds in some units. Men lose limbs to amputation, not bullets. Trench foot, tissue damage from prolonged cold and wet, disables thousands. Hypothermia kills men who fall asleep in foxholes and never wake. Civilians in the Ardennes suffer caught between armies. Villages are shelled, burned, occupied, and re-occupied. Families shelter in basements while battles rage above. Some are killed by stray shells or deliberate massacres. Others are displaced, fleeing into winter forests with no shelter or food. The battle's outcome confirms Allied material superiority. Germany can still fight skillfully, but cannot sustain offensives. Fuel, ammunition replacements, all are dwindling. The Allies, by contrast, have inexhaustible supplies. Every tank lost is replaced within days. Every gallon of fuel burned is resupplied. By late January 1945, the bulge is erased. Allied lines are restored. The German army, weakened beyond recovery, retreats into Germany itself. The war's end is visible, though months of brutal fighting remain. Soldiers remember the cold above all. Colder than combat, colder than fear. The cold that numbed fingers too stiff to pull triggers, that froze rations solid, that turned breath to ice. The Ardennes winter taught a lesson. Modern war is still vulnerable to ancient enemies, weather, terrain, and the limits of human endurance. April 16, 1945. The Oder River, 50 miles east of Berlin. Soviet forces mass for the final assault. The statistics are overwhelming: 2.5 million troops, 6,250 tanks, 7,500 aircraft, and 40,000 artillery pieces. The Red Army has traveled 1,300 miles from Stalingrad. Now, Berlin, the heart of Nazi Germany, lies ahead. The artillery barrage begins at 3 a.m. It is the largest in history. 40,000 guns fire simultaneously, illuminating the night like daybreak. Searchlights sweep forward, blinding German defenders and guiding Soviet infantry. The noise is apocalyptic, a continuous roar that drowns thought and shatters nerves. In 30 minutes, 1.5 million shells fall on German positions. German defenders, outnumbered and outgunned, fight with desperation. The forces include Wehrmacht regulars, SS fanatics, Hitler Youth teenagers, and Volkssturm, elderly men and boys conscripted in final desperation. Equipment is mismatched. Aging men carry rifles from World War I. Boys wield Panzerfausts, single-shot anti-tank weapons, with minimal training. Berlin's defenses are formidable in structure, but hollow in strength. The city is ringed with fortifications, tank traps, minefields, bunkers. But the defenders number only 45,000 trained soldiers, supplemented by 40,000 Volkssturm and scattered SS units. Against Soviet millions, the math is hopeless. Soviet tactics are brutal and effective. They advance in waves, human masses absorbing casualties, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. Tank units punch through, exploiting breakthroughs. Artillery pounds strongpoints into rubble. The advance is relentless, measured in meters per hour, paid for in blood. Civilians are trapped. Berlin's population, swollen by refugees from eastern territories, exceeds 3 million. Air raid shelters overflow, cellars become homes. The subway U-Bahn houses thousands. Families camping on platforms, living in tunnels. Food is scarce. Rationing has collapsed. Supply lines are cut. Bakeries have no flour, markets no produce. Civilians scavenge, raiding abandoned warehouses, stealing from the dead. Water supply is unreliable, pipes damaged by shelling, rivers and canals are contaminated. Disease spreads: typhus, dysentery, cholera. Soviet forces enter Berlin's outskirts on April 21. Street fighting begins, the most brutal form of combat. Buildings become fortresses. Every room is contested. German defenders fire from windows, retreat to basements, ambush advancing Soviets. The Red Army responds with artillery and flamethrowers, burning defenders out. The devastation is total. Entire blocks collapse into rubble. Streets disappear under debris. Landmarks, churches, monuments. Government buildings are shattered. Fires rage unchecked by defunct fire brigades. Berlin becomes a surreal landscape of ruins, smoke and corpses. Soviet soldiers, many of whom lost families to German invasion, show little mercy. Atrocities are widespread. Women are raped. Estimates range from tens of thousands to over 100,000. The violence is systematic, sometimes occurring in front of family members. Age provides no protection. Victims include girls as young as 12 and women in their 70s. Looting is universal. Soviet troops, poorly supplied and resentful, strip buildings. Watches, jewelry, bicycles, typewriters, anything portable is taken. Some looting is survival, much is revenge. Officers attempt to maintain discipline, but often participate themselves. Hitler, in his bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery, issues delusional orders. He commands non-existent armies to relieve Berlin, demands counterattacks from units destroyed weeks earlier. His subordinates, knowing the war is lost, comply nominally while planning escapes. On April 28, Soviet forces reach the Reichstag, Germany's parliament building, a symbolic target. The building is defended by 5,000 SS and Wehrmacht troops. The battle for the Reichstag lasts 2 days, room-to-room fighting, grenades in stairwells, machine guns in hallways. Soviet soldiers plant a red flag on the dome on April 30, a propaganda victory staged for cameras. That same day, Hitler commits suicide. He shoots himself in his bunker, alongside Eva Braun, whom he married hours earlier. Their bodies are burned in the Chancellery garden, preventing Soviet capture and desecration. The suicide ends any pretense of continued resistance, though fighting continues for days as isolated units refuse surrender. Civilians in cellars endure the final battles above them. The sounds are constant: explosions, gunfire, screaming. Buildings collapse, burying those inside. Water and sewage pipes burst, flooding basements. Families huddle in darkness, hoping to survive until silence comes. The surrender is chaotic and gradual. Individual units capitulate separately. Some defenders flee west, hoping to surrender to Americans rather than Soviets. Others fight to the death, either from fanaticism or despair. By May 2, organized resistance ends. Berlin is under Soviet control. The casualty count is staggering. Soviet forces suffer 80,000 killed and 280,000 wounded in the Berlin operation. German military losses exceed 150,000 killed or wounded. Civilian deaths are estimated at 125,000, though exact numbers are unknown. Many bodies are never recovered, buried in rubble or burned beyond identification. The city is a corpse. Infrastructure is destroyed: electricity, water, sewage. Transportation all non-functional. Buildings that survived bombing are now ruined by street fighting. The population, traumatized and starving, emerges from shelters into a landscape resembling the apocalypse. Soviet occupation begins immediately. The city is divided into sectors: Soviet, American, British, French. Though Soviet forces occupy all of Berlin initially, they establish military government, organize food distribution, and begin arrests, hunting Nazis, war criminals, and anyone deemed suspicious. Displaced persons flood the city: concentration camp survivors, freed slave laborers, refugees. They join starving Berliners in competing for scarce resources. Soup kitchens open, distributing watery broths to thousands daily. Mortality remains high: starvation, disease, suicide. Women organize survival. They clear rubble, repair buildings, and scavenge materials. Trümmerfrauen, rubble women, become symbols of reconstruction. Though their labor is born of necessity, not choice. They work without pay, motivated by hunger and the need to salvage homes. Children, orphaned or separated from parents, form gangs. They steal to survive, trading on black markets, begging from soldiers. Some are adopted by Soviet or Allied troops. Others disappear into displaced persons camps or die unrecorded. Berlin's fall ends the war in Europe. Nazi Germany ceases to exist. Victory in Europe is declared on May 8, 1945. Celebrations erupt in Allied capitals, London, Paris, New York. But in Berlin, there is no celebration, only exhaustion, grief, and the overwhelming task of survival. The battle for Berlin proves that modern cities, even heavily fortified, cannot withstand determined assault by superior forces. The cost is measured in hundreds of thousands of lives and a city reduced to ruins. The victory is complete, but the scars, physical and psychological, will take generations to heal. March 9, 1945, Tokyo, Japan. The city sleeps uneasily. Air raid sirens are familiar. American B-29 bombers have struck before, high-altitude raids targeting factories and military installations. But tonight is different. Tonight, 334 B-29s will drop 1,665 tons of incendiaries, and Tokyo will burn as no city has burned before. The bombers approach at low altitude, 5,000 to 7,000 feet, far lower than previous raids. The change in tactics reflects a strategic shift. High-altitude precision bombing proved ineffective against Japanese cities. Cloud cover obscured targets. Accuracy was poor, results disappointing. General Curtis LeMay, commanding 21st Bomber Command, orders a new approach: low-altitude area bombing with incendiaries. The bombs are M69 incendiaries, 6-pound devices filled with napalm, a gel that burns at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit and sticks to surfaces. Each B-29 carries 40 clusters, each cluster containing 38 M69s. The clusters break apart at altitude, scattering bomblets across wide areas. The objective is not to destroy individual buildings, but to ignite entire neighborhoods. Tokyo is particularly vulnerable. The city's construction is traditional, wood frame houses with paper walls and tile roofs. The buildings are densely packed, separated by narrow alleys impassable to fire trucks. Firefighting infrastructure is inadequate. Few hydrants, limited water pressure, volunteer brigades with minimal equipment. The first bombers arrive at 12:15 a.m. They drop their loads on Shitamachi. The low-lying eastern districts where working-class families live in tightly clustered wooden homes. The incendiaries ignite immediately. Hundreds of fires bloom simultaneously. Within minutes, the fires merge, creating a conflagration that generates its own weather. A firestorm develops, identical in mechanism to Hamburg's. Intense heat creates powerful updrafts, pulling in fresh oxygen from surrounding areas. The inrushing air becomes wind, accelerating to 70, then 100, then 150 miles per hour. The wind feeds the fire, which grows hotter, generating stronger winds, creating a self-sustaining cycle. Civilians woken by sirens and flames flee into streets. The firestorm generates conditions incompatible with survival. The heat is so intense that clothing ignites spontaneously. Asphalt streets melt into tar, trapping feet. Wooden beams blown by hurricane winds fly through the air like missiles. People are blown off their feet and into fires. Water offers no refuge. Canals and rivers, where thousands seek safety, become death traps. The water boils from radiant heat, steam scalds skin. Bodies float in masses, cooked. Others drown in the crush of panicked humanity. Parents hold children above water, only to have the children suffocate from smoke inhalation. The heat is so extreme that human bodies are reduced to ash and bone fragments. Victims caught in the fire's core simply cease to exist, vaporized or reduced to shadows on pavement. The phenomenon is identical to what will occur at Hiroshima 5 months later, but achieved through conventional weapons. Firefighters attempt to respond, but their efforts are futile. Water mains rupture from heat, pumps fail. Fire trucks cannot navigate streets, clogged with debris and fleeing civilians. The firefighters themselves are killed, burned alive, asphyxiated, or crushed by collapsing buildings. The bombing continues for 2.5 hours. Wave after wave of B-29s release incendiaries, feeding the firestorm. Pilots, flying at low altitude, report seeing flames from 50 miles away. Turbulence from rising heat shakes aircraft violently. The smell of burning wood, flesh, fabric permeates cockpits. Some crew members vomit from the stench. By 3 a.m., the bombing ends. The fires burn for days. 16 square miles of Tokyo are incinerated, 40% of the city's urban area. 100,000 people are dead, more than either atomic bomb will kill. Another 1 million are homeless. The casualty count is disputed. Official estimates, compiled post-war, range from 88,000 to 100,000 dead. Japanese sources suggest higher numbers, up to 130,000. The discrepancy reflects the difficulty of counting victims when bodies are reduced to ash. Many families are entirely destroyed, leaving no one to report them missing. Survivors describe the aftermath. Entire neighborhoods are gone, erased, leaving only charred foundations and ash. Bodies, where identifiable, are stacked in parks and vacant lots. Mass cremations follow, funeral pyres burning for weeks. The smell of death permeates the city. The psychological impact is profound. Survivors develop chronic trauma, nightmares, anxiety, survivors' guilt. Children orphaned by the raid are taken in by relatives, orphanages, or left to survive alone. Many develop lifelong psychological disorders. The raid's strategic effectiveness is debatable. Tokyo's industrial production, already strained, declines further, but the fire destroys primarily residential areas, not factories. The psychological impact, demonstrating that no Japanese city is safe, is arguably the primary goal. The bombing aims to break civilian morale, forcing the government to surrender. Ethical debates begin immediately. Is firebombing civilian populations justified? LeMay, asked post-war, responds bluntly, if we'd lost the war, we'd all have been prosecuted as war criminals. The statement is not regret, but acknowledgement of moral ambiguity. The Tokyo firebombing is not unique. Similar raids occur across Japan: Osaka, Nagoya, Kobe, Yokohama. By summer 1945, 67 Japanese cities have been firebombed. Cumulative civilian deaths exceed 400,000. The scale dwarfs earlier bombing campaigns against Germany. The raids prove that incendiary weapons, applied systematically against urban areas, can achieve devastation rivaling nuclear weapons. The distinction between Tokyo and Hiroshima is tonnage and delivery method, not effect. Both create firestorms, both kill indiscriminately. Both target civilians to pressure governments. For Japanese civilians, the distinction is irrelevant. They experience the war's full brutality: starvation from naval blockade, firebombing from the air, and the approaching prospect of invasion. The suffering is comprehensive, and the government's refusal to surrender prolongs it. In March 1945, however, the end is not yet visible. There is only fire, wind, and death. Tokyo burns, and 100,000 lives are extinguished in a single night. The survivors, emerging into daylight, confront a cityscape transformed into hell. The war has reached its cruelest phase, and worse is still to come. August 6, 1940, 8:15 a.m. Hiroshima, Japan. A single B-29 bomber, Enola Gay, releases one bomb, Little Boy, a uranium-based atomic weapon. The bomb falls for 43 seconds, detonating 1,900 feet above the city. The explosion releases energy equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. In an instant, the world changes. The fireball is 1,000 feet in diameter, with a core temperature of 10 million degrees Fahrenheit, comparable to the sun's interior. Everything within a half-mile radius vaporizes: buildings, vehicles, people reduced to atomic shadows on pavement. The heat pulse extends 2 miles, igniting clothing, skin, and combustible materials. The shockwave follows microseconds later, traveling faster than sound. Buildings collapse outward from the epicenter, flattened as if struck by an invisible hammer. The pressure wave shatters windows 10 miles away. People caught in the open are hurled hundreds of feet, limbs torn off by the force. 70,000 people die instantly. The death is so swift that many feel nothing. Nerve signals cannot reach the brain before the body ceases to exist. The lucky die immediately. The unlucky survive the initial blast and face hours, days, or weeks of agony. The survivors, habakusha in Japanese, experience horrors unprecedented in human history. Flash burns cover exposed skin, clothing patterns burned into flesh by thermal radiation. Eyes melt from sockets. Hair falls out in clumps. Skin slows off in sheets, leaving raw, weeping wounds. Radiation sickness appears within hours. Victims vomit uncontrollably, suffer diarrhea, and bleed from gums, noses, and internal organs. White blood cell counts plummet, leaving bodies defenseless against infection. The illness is invisible, incomprehensible. Survivors who appeared uninjured sicken and die mysteriously. Hiroshima's medical infrastructure is destroyed. 70% of the city's doctors are killed instantly. Most hospitals are obliterated. The surviving medical staff, themselves injured and sickened, face overwhelming need with no supplies. Surgery is performed without anesthesia, amputations with kitchen knives, wounds dressed with rags. Water becomes an obsession for the dying. The burns and radiation sickness create unbearable thirst. Victims beg for water, crawl to rivers, and drink contaminated water that worsens their condition. The Motoyasu and Ota rivers fill with bodies. People who drowned while drinking or collapsed and died in the water. Black rain falls within hours. Radioactive ash and condensation from the mushroom cloud. The rain is oily, sticky, and toxic. People desperate for water drink it. The contamination spreads radiation sickness to those who survived the initial blast. 3 days later, August 9, Nagasaki is bombed. Fat Man, a plutonium-based weapon, detonates at 11:02 a.m. The bomb is more powerful than Little Boy, but achieves less destruction due to Nagasaki's terrain. Hills and valleys contain the blast, limiting spread. Still, 40,000 die instantly, with 40,000 more dead by year's end. The Japanese government debates surrender. Military hardliners advocate continued resistance, even at the cost of national annihilation. Civilian officials, horrified by the atomic attacks and Soviet declaration of war on August 8, urge capitulation. Emperor Hirohito, breaking precedent, intervenes personally, deciding to surrender. The surrender announcement occurs on August 15. Hirohito's voice, broadcast via radio, is heard by Japanese civilians for the first time. His message is cryptic, using euphemistic language. The war situation has developed not necessarily to Japan's advantage. Many listeners struggle to understand he is announcing surrender. The reaction is mixed. Some feel relief the war finally is over. Others feel shame. Defeat is culturally devastating, perceived as disgracing ancestors and emperor. Military officers commit suicide rather than accept surrender. Civilians, indoctrinated to fight to the death, struggle to reconcile survival with honor. For Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors, the war's end brings no relief. Radiation sickness continues, claiming lives for months. Long-term effects emerge: leukemia, cancers, cataracts, sterility. Survivors face social stigma. Potential employers and spouses avoid hibakusha, fearing radiation contamination or genetic damage. The death toll climbs slowly. By year's end, 140,000 are dead in Hiroshima, 70,000 in Nagasaki, totaling 210,000. The figures are estimates, exact counts are impossible. Entire families vanished, leaving no one to report them dead. The ethical debate over the bombings begins immediately and persists for decades. Was the use justified? Did it end the war sooner, saving lives that would have been lost in an invasion? Or was it unnecessary, Japan already on the brink of surrender? Proponents argue that invasion of Japan would have cost millions of lives, American, Allied, and Japanese. The Japanese military was prepared to fight fanatically, mobilizing civilians for suicidal resistance. The bombings, horrific as they were, forced surrender and prevented greater carnage. Critics argue that Japan was already defeated, blockaded and starving. Soviet entry into the war on August 8 provided the decisive shock, not the atomic bombs. The bombings targeted civilians, violating principles of just warfare. The decision was driven partly by desire to demonstrate atomic power to the Soviet Union, not solely to end the war. The truth resists simplification. The bombings were both militarily effective and morally troubling. They ended the war and killed 210,000 civilians. They saved potential future casualties and created weapons capable of ending human civilization. The paradox is irresolvable. For the survivors, the debate is abstract. They know only what they experienced: fire, pain, loss, and decades of suffering. Many become advocates for nuclear disarmament, bearing witness to atomic horror, warning future generations against repeating it. The bombings inaugurate the atomic age. The weapons used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki are primitive by latest standards, Yet they demonstrate that cities can be obliterated by single bombs. The Cold War arms race, nuclear proliferation, and the threat of global annihilation all trace back to August 1945. The world after Hiroshima is fundamentally different from the world before. Humanity has acquired the power to destroy itself. The question becomes not whether such weapons exist, but whether civilization can survive possessing them. On August 6 and 9, 1945, two cities burn in atomic fire. The flames extinguish, but their light casts shadows across the future, dark and indelible. May 1945, Europe. The guns fall silent. The war in Europe is over. Yet for millions, the struggle continues. 11 million displaced persons, DPs, wander the continent. Concentration camp survivors, freed slave laborers, refugees fleeing Soviet occupation, prisoners of war released from camps. They have no homes to return to, or their homes no longer exist, or returning means persecution. The United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, UNRWA, establishes camps to house DPs. The camps are former military barracks, converted factories, or tent cities. They provide shelter, food, and medical care, but conditions are grim. Overcrowding is severe, families of 5 in rooms designed for 2. Sanitation is inadequate. Disease spreads, typhus, tuberculosis, dysentery. Food is rationed but more abundant than during the war. DPs receive 2,000 calories per day, adequate for survival, insufficient for recovery. Many are severely malnourished, requiring months to regain health. Children show stunted growth, adults suffer chronic fatigue and weakness. Medical staff treat malnutrition, infectious diseases, and psychological trauma. The psychological toll is immense. Survivors of concentration camps struggle with trauma, nightmares, flashbacks, depression. Many have lost entire families, parents, spouses, children murdered. The grief is compounded by survivors' guilt. Why did I live when they died? Repatriation is complicated. Soviet citizens who were prisoners or laborers face suspicion upon return. Stalin's regime views anyone captured or who lived under enemy control as potentially disloyal. Returnees are interrogated, sometimes imprisoned in gulags. Many refuse repatriation, preferring statelessness to Soviet persecution. Jewish survivors face unique challenges. Their homes are gone, families murdered, communities destroyed. Many wish to emigrate to Palestine, but British authorities, controlling the territory, limit immigration to prevent conflict with Arab populations. Ships carrying illegal immigrants are intercepted, passengers interned in Cyprus. American demobilization proceeds rapidly. 12 million US troops are in service at war's end. The military must discharge, transport, and reintegrate them into civilian life. The process uses a point system, service time, combat experience, children, to prioritize discharge. Those with highest points return first. Soldiers are shipped home on crowded troop transports, the same vessels that carried them to war, now reversing course. The voyages are joyful but anxious. Men wonder if they still fit into civilian life, whether jobs await, how families have changed. Letters provided glimpses, but reality requires adjustment. Housing shortages greet veterans. Wartime construction focused on military needs, not civilian housing. Returning soldiers find housing markets overwhelmed. Young couples live with parents, cramped and frustrated. The shortage fuels demand for suburban development. Levittown and similar projects emerge mass, producing affordable homes for veterans. The GI Bill provides educational and economic support. Veterans receive tuition assistance, low-interest home loans, and unemployment benefits. The program transforms American society. Millions attend college who otherwise could not afford it, creating an educated middle class. The GI Bill is among the war's most lasting domestic legacies. Yet reintegration is difficult. Veterans carry trauma, combat stress, grief for lost comrades, moral injuries from actions performed under orders. Post-traumatic stress disorder is not yet named or understood. Veterans are expected to readjust quickly and quietly. Many struggle silently, self-medicating with alcohol, withdrawing from families, unable to discuss experiences civilians cannot comprehend. The Nuremberg trials begin in October 1945. 24 major Nazi leaders are prosecuted for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. The trials establish legal precedents, documenting atrocities and assigning individual responsibility. 12 defendants received death sentences, executed by hanging. Others receive prison terms. 3 are acquitted. The trials are broadcast and filmed, providing transparency. Prosecutors present overwhelming evidence, documents, photographs, testimony from survivors and perpetrators. The proceedings validate survivors' accounts and create historical records, ensuring that denial becomes impossible. But justice is incomplete. Many perpetrators escape, fleeing to South America, hiding identities, protected by Cold War politics. The scale of the Holocaust means most participants are never prosecuted. Low-level guards, camp administrators, and collaborators return to civilian life unpunished. Rationing continues in Britain and other European nations. The war's end does not restore pre-war abundance. Agricultural production is disrupted, supply chains destroyed, labor shortages persist. British rationing, begun in 1940, continues until 1954, 14 years of controlled scarcity. The prolonged rationing breeds frustration and resentment. The Marshall Plan, announced in 1947, provides massive American economic aid to rebuild Europe. $16 billion, equivalent to over $200 billion today, flows into European recovery. The aid is motivated by humanitarianism and strategic calculation. Prosperous Europe resists communist influence. Impoverished Europe might embrace it. The Cold War begins before the Hot War fully ends. Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe solidifies into permanent control. The Iron Curtain descends. Churchill's phrase, dividing Europe into democratic West and communist East. The division persists for 45 years, another consequence of the war. Black markets persist into peacetime. Legal supplies remain scarce, prices controlled, demand high. Veterans, familiar with wartime trading, continue dealing. Cigarettes, alcohol, and consumer goods change hands in alleys and back rooms. Law enforcement cracks down sporadically, but corruption and scarcity sustain the trade. The psychological landscape is scarred. An entire generation carries war's trauma. Combat veterans, bombing survivors, camp liberators, resistance fighters, displaced persons. The trauma manifests in nightmares, alcoholism, domestic violence, and suicide. Mental health services, rudimentary at best, fail to meet the need. Children born during and after the war grow up in the shadow. They hear stories, sanitized, fragmented, or completely suppressed, from parents who cannot speak freely about what they endured. The silence itself becomes inheritance, trauma transmitted across generations without words. War crimes trials continue for decades. Adolf Eichmann, captured in Argentina in 1960, is tried in Israel and executed. Other perpetrators are prosecuted into the 1980s and 1990s. The pursuit of justice is relentless, if incomplete. Memorials proliferate. Monuments, museums, preserved camps, military cemeteries. They serve multiple purposes, honoring the dead, educating the living, warning the future. Yet memorials cannot restore what was lost. They acknowledge absence but cannot fill it. The world order is transformed. The United Nations, League of Nations successor, attempts to prevent future global wars. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights codifies principles learned bloodily. Nuclear weapons proliferate, creating deterrence through mutually assured destruction. Decolonization accelerates, old empires crumbling partly from war's exhaustion. For individuals, the transition from war to peace is gradual and uneven. A veteran finds work but wakes screaming from nightmares. A survivor builds a new family but cannot erase memories of the old one murdered. A widow remarries but still mourns her first husband. Peace arrives officially but personally. The war continues. 70 million dead, 6 years, every continent, the largest mobilization and destruction in human history. When it ends, the world is irrevocably changed. Borders are redrawn, governments are restructured, technologies are weaponized, and humanity confronts its own capacity for both atrocity and resilience. The soldiers, sailors, airmen, and civilians who survived return to normal life, or something resembling it. They work, marry, raise children, and grow old. Most do not speak of the war publicly. The memories are too painful, the experiences too extreme to share with those who were not there. The silence is protective and isolating. But the war is not forgotten. It persists in archives, in memorials, in histories, and in the collective consciousness of nations. It defines the 20th century, shaping politics, culture, and ethics for generations. The long return from war never fully completes. The veterans carry it inside, scars visible and invisible. The cities carry it in ruins and reconstructions. The world carries it in institutions and weapons designed to prevent or fight the next war. History moves forward, but the past remains heavy and inescapable.